Chapter 453. It was true that Jing Qingyong was a good-for-nothing. Moreover, he was a greedy and lustful person who could not do anything and could not eat enough of anything. However, Jing Qingyong was someone who had come from the wilderness of the southwest. He had an advantage over most warriors, and that was that he could adapt to the circumstances. In the wilderness of the southwest, there were very few large cities and prefectures. There were dense forests and wilderness everywhere. The bandits of the 23 stockade villages killed people and plundered their goods, and the land was stained with blood. Jing Qingyong's father, Jing Tiantu, had risen to power in such an environment. Therefore, although Jing Qingyong's cultivation was not good, he knew one thing. When faced with a powerful force that he could not match, the first thing he had to do was admit defeat. Therefore, under Chu Xiu's murderous aura, Jing Qingyong immediately shut his mouth and put on his clothes as fast as he could. Then, he looked at Chu Xiu with an unusually obedient expression. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Do you know who the woman beside you is?" Jing Qingyong nodded. It seemed that he had not yet realized that he had slept with the crown prince's woman. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "In this world, there are not many people who can make the crown prince a cuckold. Now that you have done it, don't you feel a sense of accomplishment?" Only then did Jing Qingyong realize what he had done. His face immediately revealed a look of horror. He had slept with the crown prince's woman. This feeling was really good. It was so good that Jing Qingyong did not know what to say now. If someone had made him a cuckold, Jing Qingyong would definitely make that person suffer a fate worse than death if he had the chance. Because of this, he knew what his fate would be. However, at this time, Jing Qingyong suddenly realized something. He directly knelt down in front of Chu Xiu and said with a sobbing tone, "Hero, save me. I will do anything you ask of me." Although Jing Qingyong was a good-for-nothing, he was not a fool. Although he had lost a part of his memory, he knew that everything he had done now was inextricably linked to this demon-like fellow in front of him. The other party wouldn't be so bored as to let him sleep with the crown prince's women. Right now, everything was in the hands of the other party. As long as he could live, he was willing to do anything. His father had just stabilized his influence not too long ago. The Iron Sword sect was the head of the 5 sects in the southwest region. Even if he, the eldest young master of the Iron Sword sect, was trash, he could still live a comfortable life. He could not bear to die. Chu Xiu stretched out a finger and said, "First, I'm not a hero. Second, your life and death are not in my hands, but in your father's hands. You won't understand even if I say more. You just need to remember one thing. I'm the second prince's man. When we return to Iron Sword sect, all you need to do is tell your father everything that happened today. He will understand. Alright, clean up this place. When this woman wakes up, she won't remember anything. But whether or not she will never remember what happened today depends on your father's attitude. Sometimes, don't choose sides too early." After saying that, Chu Xiu turned around and left, leaving behind a dumbfounded Jing Qingyong, who wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. After returning to their private room, Eunuch Li and Fang Jinqi stared at Chu Xiu, dumbfounded. They did not know what to say. Although they did not participate in what happened earlier, they had all witnessed it. It had to be said that Chu Xiu's methods were a little too dirty. It was very underhanded. However, it had to be said that this move was quite effective. What would the crown prince do if the person he wanted to recruit was cuckolded? If the crown prince could tolerate such a thing, could he still be considered a man? If the crown prince could not bear to do it, then all the effort he had put in to recruit Iron Sword sect would be in vain. Hence, the crown prince was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Chu Xiu's move was rather vicious. There was a trace of fear in Eunuch Li's eyes as he looked at Chu Xiu. He could still remember the first time he met Chu Xiu. Back then, Chu Xiu had dared to use evidence to exchange for the sky-extinguishing earth-annihilating oblivion-killing fist from LV Longguang. Back then, LV Longguang had asked Eunuch Li what his impression of Chu Xiu was. Eunuch Li's evaluation of Chu Xiu was that Chu Xiu was bold, decisive and greedy. Now, however, Eunuch Li had to add another label to Chu Xiu. Unscrupulous. For Chu Xiu, he only cared about the results, not the process. As long as he could accomplish his goal, Chu Xiu would do anything. He was a person who had no bottom line. Such a person was the most terrifying. Fortunately, Chu Xiu was currently standing on his side. At the same time, Eunuch Li was sneering in secret. This time, the Crown Prince had lost his mind. After such a long time, he still came to provoke Chu Xiu. In the past, the Crown Prince had deliberately put on an appearance of being courteous and magnanimous. Even if there was some friction, he wouldn't easily cause trouble for others. Of course, this matter was not LV Longji's fault. It was because LV Longji did not know about it at all. If Li Yuan and Eunuch Chen had really killed Chu Xiu or seriously injured Chu Xiu in the Luo family, then they would have reported it to LV Longji and regarded it as their own contribution. But in the end, they failed. Since that was the case, why would they tell others about it? It was not shameful enough. As Eunuch Li thought about it, he shook off these thoughts and asked Chu Xiu, "Official Chu, should we report this matter to the Crown Prince?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Why should we report it to the Crown Prince? Don't think too highly of the Iron Sword sect. If worse comes to worst, the Crown Prince can just give up on recruiting the Iron Sword sect in a fit of anger. There are 5 sects, 8 families, 11 sects, and 23 strongholds. There are so many forces in the southwest. We can just change our target. The Iron Sword sect is just the beginning. Eunuch Li, Lord Fang, it's time to make a move. Show us everyone's strength." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Eunuch Li did not ask any more questions. Instead, he and Fang Xinqi brought their subordinates over. Through this matter, Eunuch Li and Fang Xinqi had witnessed Chu Xiu's ruthless methods. Naturally, they did not have any more doubts and left it all to Chu Xiu to handle. Fang Xinqi's subordinates were a battalion of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, numbering over 300 men. Despite the small number, every one of them was an elite. Even the weakest among them was at the Xiantian realm. Moreover, the most important thing was not their cultivation level, but the combat prowess of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. When they were training in the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, they had already experienced hundreds of battles. Later on, when they were assigned to LV Longguang, they had also experienced countless missions. As he sized up the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, Chu Xiu suddenly felt a little emotional. In the past, his cheapskate father was a member of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. To be more precise, he was just an ordinary soldier, not even a corporal. However, such an ordinary soldier was able to proclaim himself as a tyrant in a small place after leaving the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, becoming the head of a family. From this, one could imagine just how powerful the Dragon Rider Imperial Army was. Other than the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, Eunuch Li's subordinates were also the second prince's elites. Compared to the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, the quality of these people was somewhat uneven. Most of them were unaffiliated cultivators, and in the end, they were recruited by the second prince. Some of their strength was not that bad, but there were also some whose strength was a bit lacking. However, Eunuch Li's group had a great advantage. They had over 600 people, which was double the number of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. Moreover, even the weakest among them was at the Xiantian realm. These close to 1,000 people were the power that LV Longguang had lent to Chu Xiu. Of course, in reality, LV Longguang's subordinates would definitely be much more powerful than they were now. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "I'll have to trouble the two of you to bring these people to the southwest. Remember, your movements must be careful. Otherwise, if the crown prince discovers your tracks, don't blame me. Fang Zhenqi and Eunuch Li both nodded. They were not idiots, so they naturally knew to pay attention to this. Right now, they were in the dark, and the crown prince was in the light. Of course, they had to be careful, and they could not be discovered by the crown prince. Fang Zhenqi and Eunuch Li followed behind. Chu Xiu was a step ahead of them, and he followed Jing Qingyong to the southwest. The land of eastern Qi was rich and prosperous, but the further southwest one went, the less people there were, and the more wilderness and dense forests there were. By the time they truly reached the southwest, there was not a single capital for hundreds of miles. In fact, eastern Qi did not even have any troops stationed here. They had only left 10,000 people here as a symbol, but in reality, they were just there to show off. This was not because the people of the Eastern Qi imperial court had neglected their duties, but because they knew that even if they sent troops here, it would be useless. The enemy would not attack from here. There were dense forests everywhere in the 100,000 mountains. It was fine for a single person or a small group to travel alone, but if there were a lot of people, they would inevitably be squeezed in the dense forest. Moreover, Eastern Qi was not the least bit afraid of West Chu attacking. Of the three countries in the world, West Chu was the least ambitious, and it could be said that West Chu was the weakest. This land had been conquered countless times, but each time West Chu was able to establish a country, it was always a passive defensive role. They rarely attacked other countries. It wasn't that West Chu didn't want to, it was that West Chu couldn't do it. The entire West Chu martial arts world was not weak, but there were too few people in the country and most of it was barren mountains and forests. Not to mention it was not as prosperous as Eastern Qi, it couldn't even compare to Northern Yen. The land was sparsely populated and barren, so the possibility of West Chu ruling the world was zero. Therefore, the West Chu imperial family could only play two sides. They would see which side was stronger, Northern Yen or Eastern Qi, and then they would help the other side, fighting to the end. Of course, although the southwest was close to West Chu, the atmosphere was completely different. The people of the southwest were all fierce, and this was reflected in the local martial arts world. The 5 sects, 8 families, 11 schools, and 23 strongholds were the most powerful forces in the southwest. Regardless of whether they were strong or weak, each of them had the experience of exterminating an entire family. It could be imagined just how cruel the southwest was. Chapter 454. The Southwest Iron Sword clan was located in the southwest Sangyang Prefecture and could be considered as one of the largest sects in the southwest. The Sangyang Prefecture was one of the few large prefectures in the southwest. The fact that the Iron Sword clan could establish a sect in the Sangyang Prefecture was enough to prove their strength. It had to be known that it was extremely difficult for a desolate place like the southwest to produce a martial Dao grandmaster. For Iron Sword sect to have an expert like Zheng Tiantu, who had already stepped into the half-step martial Dao grandmaster realm, was already very impressive. Moreover, even if there was a martial Dao grandmaster in the southwest, most of them would not be able to stay. Those martial Dao grandmasters would either choose to wander in the Central Plains or move their sects to the Central Plains. They would not continue to stay in a remote and desolate place like the southwest. Zheng Tiantu already had this idea. He was in the prime of his life and it was possible for him to step into the realm of martial Dao grandmaster in the future. Therefore, Zheng Tiantu chose to accept the crown prince's invitation to prepare for the future. If he could really step into the realm of martial Dao grandmaster in the future, he would prepare to move the Iron Sword clan to the Central Plains. However, he had no foundation in the Central Plains and was unfamiliar with the place. If he had the help of the crown prince, LV Longji, it would be much simpler. The southwest was still too small. Only the Central Plains was his goal. At this time, in the Iron Sword clan, Zheng Tiantu was wiping a seemingly ordinary broad-bladed iron sword. Zheng Tiantu was in his 60s this year. For someone of his realm, he was still in the prime of his life. In the past, he relied on this iron sword to lay the foundation of the Iron Sword clan. This ordinary iron sword was also continuously added with good materials and asked some master refiners to reforge it. Finally, an ordinary weapon was transformed into a precious weapon. However, the only thing Zheng Tiantu was worried about now was his son. Zheng Qingyong's talent was not particularly good. Additionally, Zheng Tiantu had devoted himself wholeheartedly to the foundation of Iron Sword sect during Zheng Qingyong's youth. Thus, Zheng Tiantu neglected Zheng Qingyong's education, causing Zheng Qingyong to have many bad habits. Now that he was like this, how could Zheng Tiantu rest assured to pass the Iron Sword clan to him in the future? Therefore, this time, Zheng Tiantu sent Zheng Qingyong to Great Liang City, not only to see the sincerity of the Crown Prince, but also to let Zheng Qingyong get familiar with the Crown Prince, so that he could have a backer in the future. At this moment, someone outside reported that Zheng Qingyong had returned. Zheng Tiantu immediately asked someone to bring Zheng Qingyong in. With a smile on his face, he asked, "How's the scenery in Great Liang City? How does His Highness feel about you?" Zheng Qingyong put on a long face and said dejectedly, "Father, I've caused a huge disaster." Zheng Tiantu's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly said, "What's going on? What did you do?" After Zheng Qingyong told Zheng Tiantu what had happened, Zheng Tiantu's face was as black as ink. He directly slapped Zheng Qingyong's face and scolded, "You're a useless thing." From childhood to adulthood, Zheng Tiantu spoiled Zheng Qingyong very much. He rarely hit him, but this time, Zheng Tiantu really couldn't help it. This idiot was obviously schemed against, causing their Iron Sword sect to be dragged into the struggle between the Crown Prince and the Second Prince. Moreover, flies don't bite seamless eggs. Now that Zheng Qingyong had fallen into this situation, it was completely his own fault. Zheng Tiantu asked him to go to Great Liang City to see the sincerity of the Crown Prince, and also to build a relationship with the Crown Prince. But in the end, he was actually eating, drinking, and sleeping with women in Great Liang City all day long. Zheng Qingyong didn't dare to refute after being slapped. He just covered his face and said pitifully, "Father, what should we do now? This matter has not been leaked yet. If the Crown Prince knows about it, we'll be finished." Zheng Tiantu thought for a moment, and he said in a deep voice, "The person who schemed against you said that he was the Second Prince's man?" Zheng Qingyong nodded again and again. Zheng Tiantu coldly snorted, "Now we don't know whether that person is the Second Prince's man or someone else. He just wants to provoke the relationship between the Second Prince and the Crown Prince. But there is still room for redemption. People say that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is broad-minded. If we tell the truth, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince should not blame us for this matter. He also knows that you are also a victim." Zheng Qingyong cautiously said, "But father, if His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is not broad-minded in this matter, what should we do?" Although Zheng Qingyong was an idiot waste, he also knew the truth of judging others by oneself. In any case, if someone dared to make him a cuckold, he would certainly want to tear that person's body into pieces. At that time, why would he care about whether that person was broad-minded or not? Zheng Tiantu sneered, "Those who can achieve great things should be able to endure things that ordinary people can't. Do you think His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is like you? Moreover, in other words, if the Crown Prince really blames our Iron Sword sect for this matter, then it proves that I was wrong about him. The Crown Prince is a narrow-minded person who disregards the overall situation for the sake of a woman. Such a person is not worthy of our Iron Sword sect to rely on. At that time, we can just look for the Second Prince to rely on." However, at this moment, a voice came from outside the door. "TSK, TSK. Sect Master Zheng is indeed worthy of being called a veteran. You have thought things through clearly and are also very shrewd. Playing both sides, you won't suffer a loss. Unfortunately, Sect Master Zheng, you are a bit too shrewd. You don't know that when it comes to choosing sides, you can't stand on both sides." Chu Xiu pushed open the door and openly appeared in the room. The moment Zheng Qingyong saw Chu Xiu, his face suddenly revealed a trace of horror. He quickly shouted, "It's him! It's him!" Zheng Tiantu's complexion slightly changed. Astral energy erupted from his body and he suddenly grasped the iron sword in his hand. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly took a step forward. This step was right beside the spot where Zheng Tiantu's qi was about to erupt. If not for Chu Xiu's step, Zheng Tiantu's sword would have already been unsheathed and slashed at that spot. Zheng Tiantu's eyebrows furrowed. The moment the sword in his hand made a slight movement, he felt a strange qi enveloping him. It was as though no matter what he did, he would fall into the opponent's control. Within the narrow space of the room, the power of Chu Xiu's heaven-sun gazing at air technique was displayed to its limit. Even Zheng Tiantu, an expert who had already reached the half-step Grandmaster realm, was forced by Chu Xiu to the point where he did not dare to take action without permission. Zheng Tiantu exhaled deeply and said in a cold voice, "Just who are you?" The person in front of him was so young and had such strength. He broke into the Iron Sword sect alone, and there was not even a trace of abnormality among his own disciples. Zheng Tiantu believed that this person was definitely not a nobody. Chu Xiu faintly said, "My name is Chu Xiu. Sect leader Zheng should have heard of my name. However, this is no longer important. Right now, I am only here on behalf of the second prince." Hearing the two words Chu Xiu, Zheng Tiantu's eyes suddenly revealed a trace of seriousness. Unlike other Jianghu elders who did not care about the younger generation, Zheng Tiantu believed that he was still in the prime of his life. Even though he was in the wilderness of the southwest, he was still very concerned about some of the news of the younger generation in Jianghu. There was no doubt that Chu Xiu had risen the fastest among the younger generation in Jianghu in the past few years. Although Chu Xiu was currently only at the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm, the number of warriors at the oneness of heaven and man realm who had died in his hands was not just 1 or 2. At the very least, with the miraculous state of Chu Xiu just now, Zheng Tiantu actually did not dare to act rashly. Zheng Tiantu had already regarded Chu Xiu as an opponent of the same realm. Letting out a long breath, Zheng Tiantu said coldly, "What is the second prince trying to do? My Iron Sword sect has not yet officially joined the Crown Prince's banner. You have already used these crafty plots to frame me. Are you trying to push me to the Crown Prince's side?" Chu Xiu sneered and said, "Sect leader Zheng, I have already appeared here. Is it interesting for you to still talk about these insincere things? A straightforward person will not resort to insinuations. I already know the choice your Iron Sword sect has made. Just now, you were still hesitating. Do you think I will believe what you said? At present, your precious son has touched the Crown Prince's woman. Even if the Crown Prince is truly magnanimous and forgives you, in the future, when he looks at your Iron Sword sect, especially when he looks at your son, won't he feel uncomfortable? I believe that except for some people with special hobbies, being cuckolded is something that no man can endure. Besides, even if the Crown Prince really tolerates it, it is useless. Right now, only a few people know about this matter. If your Iron Sword sect wishes to join the Crown Prince, then I will spread this news. When that happens, you know the consequences." Zheng Tiantu looked at Chu Xiu, a thick killing intent appeared in his eyes. He spat out the words through gritted teeth, "You are truly ruthless." If this news were to spread, Chu Xiu would be forcing the Crown Prince to kill them. It was not a glorious thing to be cuckolded. Even if the Crown Prince temporarily tolerated it for the sake of the overall situation, if this matter was spread out with great fanfare, the Crown Prince would kill them even if it was for his own reputation. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Sect leader Zheng, forgive me for speaking bluntly. You chose to join the Crown Prince because you want to find a way out for Iron Sword sect and find a future for yourself. If that is all you seek, then there is not much difference between the Crown Prince and the second prince. The Crown Prince only has a righteous title." However, Sect Master Zheng thought about it carefully. Even if the crown prince was in the name of righteousness and the title of crown prince, the second prince was still able to share the limelight with the crown prince. From this point, the gap between the two could be seen. Would there really be a future for him to rely on such a person? Right now, the choice is in your hands. To join the crown prince or to join the second prince. Sect leader Zheng, you can decide for yourself. Zheng Tiantu narrowed his eyes and said, actually, I have a third choice. What choice? To kill you. Zheng Tiantu clenched the iron sword in his hand and a strand of killing intent blossomed out from his body. As for Chu Xiu, there was a smile on his face. He said indifferently, there are many who want to kill me in Jianghu. Unfortunately, most of them failed and died instead. Sect leader Zheng, do you want to give it a try? Chapter 455. In the end, Zheng Tiantu did not choose to make a move against Chu Xiu. First, things had already reached this point. Even if he killed Chu Xiu, it would be meaningless. The second prince would definitely have someone else to deal with this matter. Also, Zheng Tiantu did not have much confidence in fighting against Chu Xiu. Although Zheng Tiantu's realm far surpassed Chu Xiu's, if they were to really fight, Zheng Tiantu couldn't say for sure how much combat power Chu Xiu, who was famous in Jianghu, could display. He was a cautious person and would rather believe in the saying that those with great reputations were not just for show. Putting down the iron sword in his hand, Zheng Tiantu said dejectedly, now that things have already reached this point, do I have any other choice? But I want to know, what does the second prince want to do? Chu Xiu said indifferently, the second prince's thinking is very simple. It's not that he wants to do something, it's that he doesn't want the crown prince to do something. Have the 5 schools, 8 families, 11 sects, and 23 strongholds in the southwest all decided to join the crown prince? Zheng Tiantu shook his head and said, not really. Most of them are just watching. But like my Iron Sword sect, a well-known power in the southwest, they have already been contacted by the crown prince's people. Almost all of them have already decided to join the crown prince. In a month, the crown prince's people will personally come to the southwest goddess peak sky-gazing cave and gather the leaders of the 5 schools, 8 families, 11 sects, and 23 strongholds to participate in the alliance meeting. At that time, who will join the crown prince's side and who will remain neutral? Only at that time will it be clear. At this point, Zheng Tiantu could not help but look at Chu Xiu and said, the crown prince has been planning this for several months. You are only starting to stop him now, but it is already too late. Among the top sects in the southwest, many of them have already made up their minds to stand on the crown prince's side. Even if you plot against me now, it is useless. Even if my Iron Sword sect openly opposes it, the influence of my Iron Sword sect is limited among the dozens of powers in the southwest. The entire southwest will still belong to the crown prince. In fact, if Chu Xiu had not set up a trap for him, Zheng Tiantu would not have joined the second prince. After all, the crown prince's people had already come many times and the conditions had already been discussed. They were just waiting for the alliance conference to officially submit to the crown prince's side. Now that he had been tricked by Chu Xiu, it was impossible for him to side with the crown prince, so he had no choice but to side with the second prince. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, too late. Not too late, just in time. Your Iron Sword sect is a great sect in the southwest region. It is only natural for you to know the details of the other forces. Tell me everything you know. You don't need to worry about the rest. All you need to know is which side you will stand on during the alliance meeting. That's enough. Zheng Tiantu couldn't help but ask, what do you want? When Chu Xiu told him his plan, Zheng Tiantu suddenly looked horrified. He couldn't help but say, madman. If you do this, do you know how many people will die in the southwest? Your methods are so cruel. When the time comes, will those sects be willing to serve the second prince? Chu Xiu indifferently said, you said it yourself. The alliance meeting will begin in a month. Since that's the case, I can only choose to use this method. To achieve great things, one shouldn't bother with trifles. In any case, if the second prince can't get it, the crown prince can't either. After receiving Zheng Tiantu's information, Chu Xiu immediately left. He wasn't really one of the second prince's people. What did it have to do with him whether or not the sects in the southwest were truly loyal to the second prince? Chu Xiu's goal was only to attack the crown prince and kill Li Yuan in passing. As for the other matters, they were just incidental. Because Eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi had brought their subordinates with them, they had to avoid the crown prince's eyes. Thus, their speed was rather slow. They only arrived 3 days later. At this time, Chu Xiu was very leisurely. Although the southwest was mostly filled with wild forests, it produced many good things. At this time, Chu Xiu was in a restaurant in the Cangyang Manor, drinking the southwest specialty, the 100-fruit wine, and tasting the strange delicacies here. Of course, in the eyes of outsiders, the delicacies here were somewhat ferocious. For example, there were some ferocious beasts that were rarely seen in the outside world, as well as some strange insects and snakes. These were all the specialty products of the southwest. Seeing Eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi arrive, Chu Xiu called out to them and said, "Eunuch Li, Lord Fang, quickly come and try these delicacies of the southwest. Although they don't look good, they're still very good to eat." Eunuch Li was in no mood to taste the delicacies. After seeing Chu Xiu, he didn't even sit down and immediately asked, "Official Chu, how is it? Did the Iron Sword sect agree to stand on the second prince's side?" Chu Xiu poured a cup of wine for the two of them and said, "I have good news and bad news here. Which one would you like to hear, Eunuch Li?" Eunuch Li frowned and said, "All right." Chu Xiu said, "The good news is that the Iron Sword sect has been settled. They will firmly stand on the second prince's side. Otherwise, the only ending for them is death." "Then what's the bad news?" Chu Xiu spread his hands and said, "The bad news is that the crown prince has been planning in the southwest for a longer time than we imagined. He has even made contact with some of the top-ranking factions of the pugilistic world in the southwest. In less than a month, the crown prince will send people to the southwest to participate in the alliance meeting. At that time, the 5 clans, 8 clans, 11 sects, and 23 strongholds will all come to confirm that the entire southwest is under the crown prince's command. Since the crown prince is so confident, then all the factions similar to the Iron Sword sect should be preparing to join the crown prince's side. People tend to follow blindly. When the time comes, this group of people will speak up together, and the other factions will definitely follow suit." Hearing this, Eunuch Li immediately said anxiously, "Then you're still in the mood to drink and eat here? Why don't you hurry up and think of a countermeasure?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Eunuch Li, don't be anxious. We already have a countermeasure, but it's a little intense. I'm afraid that it will affect His Highness the Second Prince's reputation." Eunuch Li frowned and said, "What plan?" Chu Xiu said gravely, "The plan is actually very simple. Pull in one group and kill another. When the time comes, the factions in the southwest will fight amongst themselves. Then, with the power we brought, we can guarantee that the crown prince's plan will be completely ruined. However, there is less than a month left. If we want to get a sect like Iron Sword sect to stand on our side, one is possible. However, getting 2 is quite taxing. There is not enough time for us to lay out our plans. Thus, my methods will have to be more intense. Those forces that I forcibly pull over may not be loyal to the second prince. So, whether we do this or not is up to Eunuch Li and Lord Fang to decide." Fang Zhenqi didn't say anything. In reality, under the second prince's command, he only cared about killing people and didn't touch anything else. Eunuch Li was the second prince's personal eunuch, so he naturally had to make the decision. Eunuch Li thought for a moment, then clenched his teeth and said, "Since official Chu is confident, then we'll go according to official Chu's plan. Fang Xinqi and I will support you from the side. A smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. This was exactly what he wanted to hear from Eunuch Li. This way, if something happened in the future, he wouldn't be able to blame it on Chu Xiu. 5 factions, 8 clans, 11 sects, and 23 strongholds. Chu Xiu couldn't deal with them one by one, so he only needed to find one clan for each of them. This time, Chu Xiu chose Maple Valley's Lu clan. Maple Valley was quite famous in the southwest. It was filled with maple trees, and every autumn, Maple Valley would be covered in maple red. However, it was midsummer now, so Chu Xiu and the others wouldn't be able to see such beautiful scenery. Chu Xiu led Eunuch Li and Fang Xinqi directly into Maple Valley. He asked to see the Lu clan's patriarch by name, but he didn't even say who he was. Originally, the Lu clan's disciples guarding the door didn't want to let Chu Xiu and the others in. However, as Eunuch Li and Fang Xinqi released their Unity of Heaven and Man realm aura, the Lu clan's patriarch personally came out to welcome them and politely invited the 3 of them into the meeting hall. There were no martial Dao grandmasters in the southwest, and Unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artists were considered experts. Even the Lu clan had to treat 2 Unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artists with caution. In the Lu clan's meeting hall, the Lu clan's patriarch, Lu Ji, was an old man in his 80s. He hadn't stepped down from the position of patriarch at such an old age because the next generation of the Lu clan was somewhat disappointing. He could only continue to hold the position of patriarch for the time being and see if he could find a suitable successor while he was still alive and had the strength. Lu Ji said with a smile, "May I ask your esteemed names, and why have you come to my Maple Valley's Lu clan?" Chu Xiu pointed at Eunuch Li and Fang Xinqi and said with a smile, "This is the second prince's personal eunuch chief, Eunuch Li. This is the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army's Breaking Vanguard Battalion's general, Lord Fang Xinqi." When Lu Ji saw that Chu Xiu, who had the lowest realm among the 3, spoke first, he felt a little strange. However, when Chu Xiu revealed Fang Xinqi's and Eunuch Li's identities, Lu Ji secretly cursed. He knew about the matter between the Crown Prince and the Second Prince. Now that the Second Prince's people had come to find him, Lu Ji didn't need to think to know that this was not a good thing. Therefore, Lu Ji immediately forced a smile and said, "The 3 of you." However, before Lu Ji could finish, he was interrupted by Chu Xiu. "Patriarch Lu, you don't need to say more. I know what you want to say." As he spoke, Chu Xiu began to take out the things from the secret box. Of course, they were not his own things, but the things he had asked from Eunuch Li. This is the 6th revolution cultivation technique, heart-nourishing formula of Dao. It is a Daoist secret manual that can cleanse one's marrow and nourish one's foundation. I heard that Patriarch Lu's descendants are a little weak, so this cultivation technique is just right. There are also 10 bottles of 6th revolution medicinal pills, 500 taels of purple gold, and 10 5th revolution precious weapons produced by the Divine Weapon Pavilion. After taking out these things, Chu Xiu stared at Lu Ji and said lightly, "Patriarch Lu, this is a gift from the Second Prince. If you accept it, your Lu clan will be the Second Prince's friend. If you refuse, I will slaughter your Lu clan according to the value of these gifts." Patriarch Lu, do you think that all the lives of your Lu clan added up are worth these gifts? Will there be any survivors? Chapter 456. Everyone had seen threatening people before. Whether it was the head of the Lu family, Lu Ji, Eunuch Li, or Fang Xinqi, they were all experienced people, so they were no strangers to such matters. However, they had never seen someone threaten someone as fresh and refined as Chu Xiu. Furthermore, Chu Xiu's threat was no longer a threat. It was more like an ultimatum. Lu Ji's old face turned red. Of course, this was not because he was excited, but because he was angry. How was Chu Xiu's actions any different from a bandit's? Was this considered gifting? It was more like throwing his life away. However, Lu Ji really didn't know what to say, as this was a single-choice question. Lu Ji would normally be overjoyed as he looked at the gifts on the table. However, at this moment, these things only made him feel like his hands were scalding hot, as if they were going to take his life. He had already promised the crown prince. Was he going to betray him now? Of course, if he didn't betray him, then these gifts to bribe him would become money that could take his life. Lu Ji had been in the southwest for decades and had experienced countless killings. He could see a hint of killing intent in Chu Xiu's eyes. It was an indifferent killing intent. People with such eyes wouldn't take human life seriously. They were even more terrifying than those ferocious-looking people who threatened to kill at every turn. Thus, Lu Ji believed that if he refused, the other party would really slaughter the Lu family with his men. Meeting Chu Xiu's indifferent gaze, Lu Ji smiled bitterly as he put away the gifts one by one. If the crown prince's men were in the southwest, he would still have the intention of asking for reinforcements. However, the crown prince's men would only arrive a month later. By then, the crown prince's men would probably only be able to collect his corpse. A smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. A wise man submits to circumstances. Lu family head, you are a wise man. On the day of the meeting, you should know which side you are on. After saying that, Chu Xiu left with eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi, leaving behind Lu Ji, who wore a complicated expression. After leaving the Lu family's residence, eunuch Li asked doubtfully, "Official Chu, will the Lu family really stand on our side after accepting the items? What if they go back on their words?" Chu Xiu laughed coldly and said, "Go back on my word?" He wouldn't dare. If he accepted our things, he would be betraying the crown prince. Even if he immediately explained to the crown prince, the impression of him as a traitor would remain in the crown prince's heart. Even if the crown prince said that he trusted him, does Lu Ji dare to completely trust the crown prince? Chu Xiu's words were like a tongue twister, but eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi were not stupid, so they immediately understood. That was indeed the case. If Lu Ji were to betray them after accepting their items, he would not be able to please either side. He would offend both the crown prince and the second prince. At that time, as long as one of them was enraged, no one would be able to help him. Thinking of this, eunuch Li also subconsciously glanced at Chu Xiu. It had to be said that this Chu Xiu was really ruthless. He didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. As long as he found the right target, he would be able to deal with a big power in a day. Less than a month's time was more than enough for them. Although the process was indeed unpleasant to hear, and Lu Ji must be cursing the three of them in his heart, that wasn't important. The result was the most important. Chu Xiu looked to the east and said in a deep voice, "The next one is the Grey Sword sect of Mount Diansang. But before that, I'll have to trouble the two of you to act as the kidnappers." Eunuch Li frowned and said, "Kidnap who?" "The three sons of the sect master of the Grey Sword sect, wind-chasing divine sword Han Qianting. According to the information I obtained from the Iron Sword sect, his three sons are unwilling to cultivate in Mount Diansang. Every month, they would go out for a day to play. Make use of this one day to kidnap these three people without alerting anyone. Only the two of you will be able to do it." Eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi were somewhat resistant to Chu Xiu's task. After all, they were also people with status, but now they had to act as kidnappers. It was really degrading. However, the most important thing at the moment was to destroy the crown prince's plan. They couldn't care less and could only do as he said. 5 days later, in the Grey Sword sect of Mount Diansang, the sect master of the Grey Sword sect, Han Qianting, stood on the cliff at the back of Mount Diansang with a frown. Although his three sons were disappointing, they knew their priorities. Usually, they would go down the mountain to play and come back in a day. But now, it had been 2 days and not even a shadow was seen. Mount Diansang is a famous mountain in the southwest. But I think with sect master Han's mood, you probably don't have time to appreciate the scenery of Mount Diansang. What a pity. The moment he heard this voice, Han Qianting was shocked. He looked at the young cultivator who suddenly appeared behind him and shouted, "How did you get in here?" Mount Diansang was easy to defend but difficult to attack. Other than a small path up the mountain, it was surrounded by cliffs. This was the forbidden area of the Grey Sword sect's back mountain. Only the Grey Sword sect's disciples were qualified to enter. How did this stranger get past the interrogation of so many Grey Sword sect's disciples and enter this place? Chu Xiu walked forward step by step. For a sect of the Grey Sword sect's level, it was fine if they didn't have a martial Dao grandmaster guarding it. They didn't even have a formation. With Chu Xiu's current mental strength cultivation, it was not difficult to enter such a place. Making a shushing gesture at Han Qianting, Chu Xiu indifferently said, "Sect leader Han, lower your voice. Don't draw others here. Could it be that you don't want the lives of your 3 sons anymore?" As he said this, Chu Xiu took out 3 jade pendants. These jade pendants were blood red in color and looked very magnificent. These 3 pieces of blood jade were gifts from Han Qianting to his 3 sons. They could nourish their blood and qi. The shape was personally carved by him, so Han Qianting could almost recognize them at a glance. These were his sons' things. Han Qianting's expression suddenly changed and he shouted in a low voice, "What did you do to my 3 sons?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Nothing, I just invited them to be guests. But I can't guarantee what will happen to them in the future. It all depends on Sect Master Han's attitude." Han Qianting said angrily, "The rule of the pugilistic world is that one shouldn't implicate family members." "Who are you? Shouldn't implicate family members?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Sect Master Han, you're wrong. Pulling one hair will affect the whole body. When you make a decision, you and your family will be implicated. So, as a person, it's best to be more cautious. As for who I am, that's not important. All you need to know is that I'm the second prince's man. That's enough." Han Qianting instantly understood everything, coldly saying, "The second prince is a dignified prince, I didn't expect him to be so despicable." Chu Xiu shrugged, not minding it. In any case, Han Qianting was scolding the second prince, not him. Looking at Han Qianting, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Sect Master Han, calm down. Some things aren't bad. As far as I know, Sect Master Han's 3 young masters aren't very talented. In your lifetime, will the next generation of the Blue Point Sword sect be inherited by your 3 young masters?" This was an unknown factor. A sect is not an aristocratic family, and the Blue Point Sword sect doesn't belong to you alone. For the benefit of the entire Blue Point Sword sect, is it worth it to abandon your own son? Han Qianting gritted his teeth, "What does the second prince want?" Chu Xiu waved his hand, "It's simple. In a month's time, the Blue Point Sword sect will stand on the second prince's side. There's no need for Sect Master Han to worry, your 3 sons are safe and there are experts guiding them on the martial Dao. After the matter is settled, the 3 young masters will definitely return safely to Grey Point Mountain. Moreover, if Sect Master Han needs it, the second prince will also support Sect Master Han in the future, allowing one of your 3 young masters to smoothly inherit Grey Point Sword sect." Han Qianting's expression flickered, but Chu Xiu didn't say anything. He only lightly said, "There's no need for Sect Master Han to be in such a hurry to make any promises. When the time comes for the Blue Point Sword sect's meeting, we'll see how you perform. In any case, as long as Sect Master Han remembers one thing, the lives of your 3 sons are in your hands." With that said, Chu Xiu directly turned and descended the mountain, not bothering to look at Han Qianting's expression. Chu Xiu was 90% sure that Han Qianting would choose to agree. The difference between a sect and an aristocratic family was that an aristocratic family was made up of bloodlines. One's loss was shared, and one's glory was shared. On the other hand, a sect was biased towards the individual. Han Qianting was only the sect master of the Blue Point Sword sect, but the Blue Point Sword sect didn't represent Han Qianting. Which was more important, his own son or the future of the sect? In the intelligence Zheng Tiantu gave to Chu Xiu, this sect master Han wasn't the kind of heroic person who would sacrifice himself for the sect. On the contrary, he had always wanted his son to inherit the position of sect master. After descending Blue Point Mountain, Eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi were waiting for him. "Is the matter settled?" Eunuch Li asked. Chu Xiu nodded. "Rest assured, Eunuch Li. I won't make a move unless I have absolute confidence. Now there's only one left. Just pick one from the 23 strongholds." Eunuch Li's expression was somewhat gloomy. "How are you going to make a move this time? Don't tell me you want us to go kidnap again?" Chu Xiu shook his head. "No need. This time it's very simple. Just throw money at them. Most of the bandits in the 23 strongholds are a motley crew. What they want is very simple, and that's profit. Moreover, the Crown Prince himself doesn't pay much attention to these bandits. He doesn't put as much effort on them as the people from the Iron Sword sect. So as long as we throw money at them, we can directly throw a stronghold that will submit to the second prince." Eunuch Li frowned, "But is throwing money at them reliable?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. "Of course they are reliable. Bandits are just greedy, not idiots. Since we can bribe them with so much money, it means that we can also take out the same amount of money to slaughter them." Chapter 457. The martial arts forces in the southwest were generally not strong, and the bandits were a motley crew. In fact, the existence of the bandits in the southwest was longer than that of the local martial arts forces. After all, this place was originally desolate, and it was only when the trade route was opened that it became somewhat populated. And where there was a trade route, there was no lack of people, and that was bandits. However, these bandits did not have any plans, and most of them had an attitude of muddling through, and they even killed each other. So after so many years, there was no bandit force that could be used, and most of them were still just a motley crew. However, when one thought about it, it made sense. Bandits were inherently weak. The rise of the 36 great bandits of the northern lands was already a rare occurrence for thousands of years. As for the bandits of other places, they could only be considered small skirmishes. Chu Xiu and Eunuch Li chose Qingfeng Stronghold, one of the stronger of the 23 strongholds. The leader of the Qingfeng Stronghold, the smiling scholar, Song Qian, was also interesting. Not only did he look like a scholar, but he was also a scholar. It was said that in his early years, Song Qian was just a scholar. He was so poor that he had no money to study, so he could only run to work as an accountant for a caravan. In the end, he was robbed by bandits on the way, and he was taken by the bandits to work as an accountant for the stronghold. Later, because he gave the stronghold a good idea, it caused the stronghold's power to soar. Song Qian also changed from an accountant to a military advisor, and he also got the opportunity to practice martial arts. Moreover, Song Qian did not expect that a weak scholar like him would have such a good talent in martial arts, and it only took him more than 20 years to reach the realm of the unity of heaven and man. So he found an opportunity to directly kill the previous stronghold master, and renamed the stronghold to Qingfeng Stronghold until today. This time, when Chu Xiu and the others arrived at Qingfeng Stronghold and felt the strength of the three, Song Qian directly came out to greet them. Although he had become a stronghold master, Song Qian still wore a scholar's robe, and with his elegant appearance, at this time, he did not look like a bandit leader, but more like a teacher. "May I know why the three of you came to my Qingfeng Stronghold? Did my subordinates steal your goods by mistake? Don't worry, I'll get someone to send it back right away. I'll also send a gift as an apology." Song Qian cupped his hands politely and his attitude was very humble. Some of the caravans traveling to the southwest could move, while others could not. For example, the merchant caravans from the major factions had strong defenses. Not to mention whether they could even touch them, even if they did, the other party would take revenge on them in the future. Therefore, the bandits of the 23 strongholds changed very quickly. Who knew if there would be a day when someone else would directly break into the stronghold and exterminate the entire clan? Because of this, after Song Qian became the fort master, he set down a rule that he would only rob and not kill. He could not go to the extreme. Moreover, he couldn't use it immediately after he stole it. Instead, he had to store it for a few months. When he saw that no one came for revenge, he could then spend it. If someone came, then he would lower his stance, return the item, and apologize. Anyway, to bandits like them, face was not something they could eat, so what was the use of having him? Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Head Song guessed wrong. We are not here to ask for something, but to deliver something." As he said this, Chu Xiu began to take out the purple gold from the outside, piece by piece. Needless to say, this scene was quite shocking. At least to a bandit leader like Song Lian, he had never seen so much purple gold in his entire life. He had quite a lot of ordinary gold and silver items, but purple gold could be used to set up matrices and forge weapons. It was definitely a hard currency. Ordinary small aristocratic families would at most have a few dozen taels of purple gold. For someone like Chu Xiu to take it out and place it on the table piece by piece, it was quite shocking. Moreover, to be honest, even Chu Xiu himself was moved by this purple gold. Even the annual tax revenue of the Guanxi region was not this much. A prince was a prince, after all, especially a prince like the second prince who held real power and had the chance to ascend to the throne in the future. Their foundations were not ordinary. After taking out 10 purple gold bricks in a row, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Head Song, these are gifts from the second prince. I wonder if these things are enough for Head Song to stand on the second prince's side? Of course, if Head Song says it's not enough, I still have more here." Song Lian swallowed his saliva, his eyes almost imprinted on the purple gold bricks. Song Lian was indeed shocked when he heard about the second prince, but he quickly regained his composure. Whether it was the crown prince or the second prince, the most important thing was to be able to obtain benefits. Moreover, it was indeed as Chu Xiu had guessed. The crown prince did not spend too much effort on the bandits of the 23 strongholds. Compared to some other powers, the 23 strongholds had the most bandits, but they were still a motley crew. The crown prince, LV Longji, had an innate dislike for these bandits. Furthermore, as long as the sects in the southwest agreed to pledge their allegiance to the crown prince, it was no longer important whether these bandits pledged allegiance or not. In any case, they would not be able to cause much trouble. Thus, Eunuch Chen and Li Yuan, the crown prince's trusted aides, did not even personally come to the 23 strongholds. They only sent a few ordinary subordinates to discuss the conditions with the bandits and give them some things before leaving. Even if Song Lian and the other bandits of the 23 strongholds were dissatisfied, it was useless. Once the other powers of the martial arts world agreed, if the bandits of the 23 strongholds wanted to cause trouble, the local martial arts world powers would probably be enough to take care of them all before the crown prince even made a move. Thus, after Chu Xiu took out so many purple gold bricks, Song Lian did not even need to think about it and immediately leaned towards the second prince's side. As for Chu Xiu asking him if it was enough, although Song Lian thought that he would never complain about having too many purple gold bricks, he still forced his gaze away from the purple gold bricks and said with a dry laugh, "It's enough. Of course it's enough." He was not an idiot and knew what the consequences of being insatiably greedy were. 10 purple gold bricks were enough to buy the entire Qingfeng stronghold. If he were to be even more greedy and take the opportunity to extort money from the second prince, the consequences would probably not be good. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "It's good that it's enough. Head Song, you should know what to do at the alliance meeting in a month's time." Song Lian hurriedly nodded and said, I know. Please rest assured. The second prince is so generous. Although I am a bandit, I also know the word trustworthy. I will definitely not let your highness down. Chu Xiu nodded and turned to leave. Eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi, who were behind him, looked at each other. They also did not dare to believe that the matter had been settled so easily. Wasn't this a little too fast? Fang Zhenqi was on a mission to kill people, so he was only slightly surprised by the amount of time Chu Xiu had used. However, Eunuch Li was different. He had been by LV Longguang's side for a long time. Although he was not the most capable subordinate of LV Longguang, he was the person LV Longguang trusted the most. He had participated in many secret missions and carried out many of them. He could also use the methods that Chu Xiu had used. Other than the time when he had tricked Jing Chengyong, the other methods did not require much skill. However, what was truly terrifying about Chu Xiu's methods was that he had a grasp of the human heart. When faced with different people, he could use the most suitable methods to make them submit. This was the most terrifying thing. No one was invulnerable. As long as these people had the slightest flaw, they would be caught by Chu Xiu. Then, he would use the most suitable method to defeat them one by one. After dealing with these people, Chu Xiu, Eunuch Li, and the others went into hiding in the southwest. A month later, Li Yuan and Eunuch Chen also brought people to the southwest. This time, many of the crown prince's subordinates had come. Other than Li Yuan and Eunuch Chen, there were also 3 experts at the unity of heaven and man realm. They were all guests that the crown prince had recruited. Once again coming to the southwest, Li Yuan felt rather high-spirited. The main people in charge of recruiting and subduing these people in the southwest were Li Yuan and Eunuch Chen. If this matter was done well, his status in the eyes of the crown prince would definitely rise by a large margin. After arriving in the southwest, Li Yuan did not delay. He directly sent invitations to the people of the 5 clans, 8 clans, 11 sects, and 23 strongholds, asking them to come to the Goddess Peak's heaven-gazing cave to participate in the alliance meeting. The Goddess Peak was very famous in the southwest. Legend had it that in ancient times, a goddess had ascended here, which was why it was named the Goddess Peak. As for the heaven-gazing cave, it was a cave in the Goddess Peak. Because there was a huge opening at the top, one could see the sky if they raised their heads, which was why it was called the heaven-gazing cave. At this moment, the huge cave had already been tidied up neatly. The leaders of the 5 clans, 8 clans, 11 sects, and 23 strongholds were all gathered here. They were seated according to their respective power rankings. Li Yuan, Eunuch Chen, and the others stood in the center. After everyone had arrived, Li Yuan cupped his hands towards the people present and said, "Everyone, although the southwest is desolate and barren, it is still the territory of the Dachi kingdom. Everyone started from scratch. It was not easy for you to establish such a foundation in the southwest. I am very impressed. Now that His Highness the Crown Prince has the mandate of heaven, he will ascend to the throne in the future. Therefore, we have prepared to invite all the outstanding talents of the Jianghu in the southwest to jointly raise the prestige of the Dachi kingdom." Li Yuan spoke passionately, and there was some applause from below. However, Li Yuan still felt that something was wrong. Why were the reactions of some of the people below not so intense? Since they had already come to participate in the alliance meeting, could it be that they still had some doubts about this matter? However, at this moment, a sneering voice came from outside. They started from scratch and accumulated such a large family property, but the crown prince took it all away with a single sentence. He even glorified it by raising the prestige of the Dachi kingdom. Could it be that the crown prince is preparing to lead these warriors of the southwest to attack the northern Yan? Chapter 458. When Chu Xiu appeared in front of Li Yuan's expression suddenly changed. What shocked him was not that Chu Xiu had appeared here, but that Chu Xiu was followed by Fang Zhenqi and Eunuch Chen. What this meant was self-evident. Chu Xiu had actually submitted to the second prince. Li Yuan said coldly, "Chu Xiu, if I had known that you had submitted to the second prince, Eunuch Chen, and I would have taken your life at the Luo family, even if we had to chase you for thousands of miles." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "You've misunderstood the cause and effect of this matter. If you hadn't caused trouble for me at the Luo family, I wouldn't have chosen to help the second prince. Everyone in the pugilistic world knows what kind of character I, Chu Xiu, am. I've never been magnanimous. It's not my style to swallow a slap in the face." Looking at the dragon riders and eunuch Li's subordinates that Chu Xiu had brought, Li Yuan couldn't help but sneer. "You want to cause trouble for me with just these few people? You're dreaming. Chu Xiu, you've chosen the wrong place." Li Yuan didn't know about Chu Xiu's arrangements in the southwest. He thought that Chu Xiu had only followed his tracks. If it had been somewhere else, Chu Xiu's people would have caused him some trouble if they had suddenly launched a sneak attack. But now, the warriors in the southwest were all the crown prince's men. Li Yuan immediately said in a deep voice, "Everyone, since you've already chosen to submit to the crown prince, you should show some sincerity. Kill these people and do it immediately." Li Yuan was rather decisive in his actions. Under such circumstances, he could only kill Chu Xiu and all the subordinates of the second prince. This would be the most beneficial to the crown prince. If they were in Great Liang City, even if Li Yuan had such an opportunity, he would not dare to do it, because that was Great Liang City. The imperial family of Eastern Qi did not forbid infighting, but in the capital city of the imperial family, the infighting had to be controlled to a certain extent. It was simply impossible for hundreds and thousands of people to fight at the same time in Great Liang City. Following Li Yuan's angry shout, there were indeed quite a number of martial artists who belonged to the 5 sects, 8 families, and 11 sects who rushed out. Iron Sword sect was not the only sect that Li Yuan was trying to win over. At that moment, those sects had already decided to side with the crown prince. Thus, they were trying to seize the credit and improve their impression in the crown prince's eyes. Moreover, this group of people was not worried at all that they would lose. The strength of their side had completely crushed Chu Xiu's side. The crown prince's side already had 4 great experts at the One with Heaven realm. In addition to the people from the southwest, there were over 10 people at the One with Heaven realm. In contrast, what about Chu Xiu's side? There were only Eunuch Chen and Fang Zhenqi. It would be too easy to get rid of them. However, they did not realize that the people from the Iron Sword sect, who used to fight with them for everything, did not even move. Instead, there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. At this moment, Li Yuan also said to the 3 guests behind him in a deep voice, "You guys attack too?" One of the 3 said doubtfully, "With just those few people on the other side, do we even need to make a move? They are just 2 martial artists at the One with Heaven realm, and one is only at the 5 Qis collecting in the Origin realm. Don't these fellows from the southwest want to snatch the credit? Just let them have it." Li Yuan coldly snorted and said, "Stop talking nonsense and quickly attack. What do you guys know? That is Chu Xiu, who is ranked 6th on the Longhu list. Weaker martial artists at the One with Heaven realm have no way of fighting back in front of him. Just this group of rotten fish and shrimps will not be able to kill an expert ranked 6th on the Longhu list." Although Li Yuan wanted to recruit these martial artists from the southwest on behalf of the crown prince, Li Yuan actually looked down on them. These martial artists from the southwest were not very strong. After all, most of them were born in the wilderness and had limited cultivation techniques. It could be said that they were born with a disadvantage. No matter how strong they were, they could not be that strong. Li Yuan had exchanged blows with Chu Xiu before. Although he kept saying that he wanted to teach Chu Xiu a lesson on behalf of the crown prince, he was not foolish enough to want to make a move himself. Li Yuan had estimated that if he were to personally fight with Chu Xiu, he would not even be able to withstand 3 moves from Chu Xiu. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. The strength on his side could be said to be overwhelming. There was a chance to get rid of Chu Xiu completely. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Eunuch Chen, Lord Fang, make your move." As soon as he said this, Chu Xiu was the first to rush out. Seeing this, some of the martial artists from the southwest could not help but sneer. To be honest, the majority of them really did not know Chu Xiu's identity. Even though Li Yuan had called out Chu Xiu's name, they still could not recall who Chu Xiu was. In the wilderness of the southwest, far from the Central Plains, the disputes of the Central Plains had nothing to do with them. Not to mention a young talent on the Longhu list like Chu Xiu, they probably did not even care about the battle between the righteous and demonic paths on floating Jade Mountain. In their opinion, the second prince really had no subordinates. Even a martial artist at the Five Chi's origin realm was so arrogant and dared to make the first move. He was simply courting death. However, as soon as the two sides came into contact, the faces of the southwestern cultivators instantly became filled with terror. The first to rush out was the head of the Su family, one of the 8 families. This Su family head was eager to make a contribution. He had actually used a secret movement technique and was the first to attack Chu Xiu. He held a crescent blade that was like a full moon in his hand. Black demonic chi radiated from it, making it look very ferocious. Die! The Su family head slashed down with his blade. Demonic chi lingered on the blade and a dazzling demonic chi blade aura erupted. However, the moment he slashed down with his blade, he suddenly realized that the young man opposite him seemed to have a mocking smile on his face. A martial artist at the Five Chi's origin realm actually dared to mock him? Could it be that this person was an idiot? But then he realized that the one who was truly stupid was himself. The moment the Su family head slashed out with his blade, Chu Xiu also made his move. Facing the ferocious demonic blade, Chu Xiu formed the lion seal with his hand. In an instant, a thunderous Buddhist roar exploded. Under the thunderous Buddhist roar, the Su family head's expression suddenly changed. The voice seemed to resound in his mind, causing his skull to swell. Even his blade began to tremble. 9 Transformation Lion Roar. Is this guy a layman disciple of the Great Light Temple? Some people who did not know Chu Xiu exclaimed. After all, the Great Light Temple's 9 Transformation Lion Roar was very famous in the martial world. Chu Xiu's lion seal was very similar to the 9 Transformation Lion Roar. It was even 80% similar. It was normal for people to mistake it. Meanwhile, Zheng Tiantu, who knew Chu Xiu's identity, had a strange expression. Chu Xiu was a disciple of the Great Light Temple? The disciples of the Great Light Temple would probably want to kill him. At this moment, Chu Xiu's blade was also unsheathed. The pitch-black heavenly demon dance was unsheathed by Chu Xiu. In an instant, boundless demonic chi gathered on the long blade. The crimson demonic chi was like a sharp blade, staining the black blade with an evil crimson glow. As Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, evil spirits wailed and demons roared. This blade seemed to have been slashed out from hell, causing the expressions of everyone present to change. Compared to Chu Xiu's demonic blade, the Su clan leader's demonic blade paled in comparison. It was no wonder that Chu Xiu would show a mocking smile. Using a blade in front of him, using a demonic blade in front of him, was asking to be humiliated. The Su clan leader also felt the terror of Chu Xiu's demonic blade. He could not help but reveal a look of shock in his eyes. The blade in his hand reversed, wanting to temporarily defend and avoid the blade's edge. However, it was too late. Chu Xiu was not going to give him this chance. The moment he changed his attack, he felt as if he had fallen into a large net. All possible routes of escape were blocked. He had nowhere to run and could only face it head-on. Fight! The moment Chu Xiu's Avicii Dao slashed down 3 times, the Su clan leader's body immediately burst into a bloody mist. He had actually decisively chosen to burn his blood essence. For warriors from the southwest like the head of the Su family, although the cultivation techniques they cultivated were not very strong, because of the cruel environment, almost every one of them had stood out from this kind of environment where they fought all day long. Their fighting styles were all decisive and fierce. Seeing that something was wrong, the Su clan leader immediately burned his blood essence. A dense blood chi surged into his blade, causing the bloody light on his blade to soar several feet. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu's blade had already landed. In an instant, there was a loud bang from the collision of stellar chi. The demonic chi and blood chi flew in all directions. Chu Xiu stood in place, but the Su clan leader had already been cut in two by Chu Xiu. One slash. With only one slash, the Su clan leader, who had some fame in the southwest, had been cut in two like a chicken being slaughtered. This scene immediately stunned the people who were about to rush up from behind. To put it bluntly, sometimes even killing a chicken was not as satisfying as this. However, in the eyes of Zheng Tiantu, who was equivalent to a martial artist in the unity of heaven and man realm, Chu Xiu had used more than two moves. The Su family's patriarch was the same. When the two sides exchanged blows, they had changed back and forth many times. This kind of secret confrontation was not something that could be seen by experts in the same realm. Of course, for most warriors, they could only see these things in front of them. Chu Xiu's blade had cut down the Su clan leader. It was that simple. Trash. Li Yuan cursed under his breath. He recalled the scene at the Luo family where Chu Xiu had shocked everyone. In the martial arts world, sometimes quantity did not necessarily equal quality. This was also the case in the army. In particular, there were many experts in the Eastern Qi military, and those generals loved to fight in front of the battlefield. Taking the head of the enemy's general in the midst of 1,000,000 soldiers was a serious blow to the morale of the enemy. Now, Chu Xiu already had this feeling. Chapter 459. As Chu Xiu's saber shocked everyone present, Li Yuan turned to the three crown prince's guests and said, "Do you still think it's overkill for me to let you take action?" The three warriors looked at each other in dismay. Chu Xiu's strength was indeed somewhat beyond their imagination. Right now, the warriors in the southwest were temporarily scared to the point of not daring to move forward, so they could only take the lead. Li Yuan looked at Zheng Tiantu and the others who had not made a move before and frowned. "Master Zheng, what is the meaning of this? Since you have joined the Crown Prince's camp, then don't be half-hearted. Let's all work together to take care of this Chu Xiu. After that, you will be rewarded according to your contributions. Don't worry, with His Highness's benevolent reputation, they will definitely not let you suffer any losses." Zheng Tiantu nodded and followed them out. But at this moment, Zheng Tiantu, Lu family head Lu Ji, Azure Point Sword sects Han Tingyi, and Qingfeng stronghold Song Lian all suddenly made a move at the same time and launched a sneak attack on their companions. Especially Zheng Tiantu, he happened to be following behind a guest of the Crown Prince. His iron sword seemed inconspicuous, but when it was unsheathed, it was sharp and cold. Its speed was simply fast to the extreme. With one sword strike, it broke the law and directly beheaded the unguarded guest on the spot. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Li Yuan didn't think that Zheng Tiantu's group of 4 would suddenly betray them. Even the other martial artists of the southwest region didn't think that Zheng Tiantu's group would suddenly betray them. After the sneak attack, the 4 of them naturally did not dare to continue to stay there. They directly turned around and ran to Chu Xiu's side. Everyone was so shocked that no one actually intercepted them. Zheng Tiantu and the other 3 even looked at each other, revealing a strange expression in their eyes. Originally, they thought that they were the only traitors. They did not expect that there would be so many comrades. At this time, Li Yuan finally reacted. He pointed at Zheng Tiantu and the others and shouted angrily, "Zheng Tiantu! The 4 of you dare to betray His Highness the Crown Prince? Are you looking to die?" Up until now, Li Yuan still could not understand how Chu Xiu had managed to make the 4 families who had already agreed to join the crown prince betray him. Or it could be said that it was not Chu Xiu's doing at all, but the second prince had long been aware of their movements, so he had done something in advance. However, Li Yuan had no time to think about this at the moment because with the betrayal of Zheng Tiantu and the others, their side had lost a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm and injured 3 people. The situation had been reversed. Most importantly, those martial artists of the southwest who had maintained their neutrality and were prepared to follow the crowd were now wavering. On one side was the crown prince, and on the other side was the second prince. In fact, it didn't matter who they chose to side with. The simplest method was to side with whoever was stronger. Previously, they had felt that the crown prince was very powerful, but now, they felt that the second prince seemed to be even more powerful. At this time, in the face of Li Yuan's questioning, Zheng Tiantu and the other 2 looked a little ugly. They did not really want to betray, but they were forced to do so. Zheng Tiantu cupped his hands and said, "Lord Li, there are some things that we do not want to do, but there is nothing we can do. Fate makes fools of people. Now, we can only stand on the opposite side of His Highness the Crown Prince." Song Qian curled his lips. He did not have so many reasons to be helpless. It was entirely because the second prince was more generous than the crown prince that he chose to betray. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Sect Master Zheng, since you have already betrayed us, why are you still talking so much nonsense? Why, do you regret it now?" Zheng Tiantu and the others hurriedly shook their heads. They had already betrayed the crown prince. If they offended the second prince's people now, it would be purely courting death. "It's good that you don't regret it." Chu Xiu nodded. He suddenly waved his hand and shouted, "Kill." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Eunuch Li and Fang Xinqi directly led their people and charged forward. Although from the beginning of the plan until now, Eunuch Li and Fang Xinqi had always existed as Chu Xiu's assistants, their real strength was not weak. Eunuch Li was a eunuch from the imperial palace. In the past, he was sent to be LV Longguang's personal eunuch. This was already enough to prove Eunuch Li's strength. Eunuch Li did not use any weapons. His hands were his best weapons. Every palm strike brought with it an awe-inspiring coldness that directly froze the martial artist's meridians and true energy. It could be said to be incomparably evil. Fang Xinqi, on the other hand, was the opposite of Eunuch Li. His martial arts were extremely firm and fierce. With a long spear in his hand, every spear strike was like the pressure of Mount Tai, crushing mountains and breaking mountains. With Fang Xinqi and Eunuch Li taking the lead, as well as Zheng Tiantu and the others attacking together, the crown prince's side was almost instantly suppressed. As for the group of martial artists from the southwest, apart from a small portion who still chose to stand on the crown prince's side, the majority of them were actually just watching from the sidelines. These martial artists from the southwest actually had no loyalty to the crown prince to speak of. For these martial artists from the wildlands who spent most of their time killing, the truth was that the victor was king. If they wanted to choose someone to side with, they would naturally choose the strongest one. Chu Xiu brandished his saber and charged at Li Yuan. He had schemed so much. Besides taking revenge on the crown prince, one of the reasons was to kill Li Yuan and seize his good fortune. Seeing that Chu Xiu was charging at him, Li Yuan's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly shouted, "Stop Chu Xiu!" Following Li Yuan's shout, his subordinates, who were at the 5 Qis origin realm, and a foreign chamberlain at the unity of heaven and man realm, all charged towards Chu Xiu. If one person could not stop Chu Xiu, then a group of people would do. Although Li Yuan's strength was inferior to these vassals, he was the crown prince's trusted aide and had a very high status among the crown prince's subordinates. Thus, apart from Eunuch Chen and Li Yuan, nothing could happen to anyone but the 2 of them. The vassal who attacked Chu Xiu used a weapon that was rarely seen in the martial arts world. It was a gigantic deep gold broadaxe that was as tall as a person. He was also a burly man, and it was obvious that he was walking the path of physical strength. With a swing of the broadaxe, the surrounding stellar energy was stirred up by the power of the broadaxe. With an incomparably majestic aura, the broadaxe chopped down at Chu Xiu's head. Martial artists who cultivated this kind of martial arts did not need much technique to speak of. When their strength reached the extreme, they could directly use their strength to break everything. However, it was a pity that this vassal had not reached this realm. At the very least, when facing Chu Xiu, he could not unleash his strength at all. The stars in Chu Xiu's eyes rotated, and the sun and moon changed. The power of the heaven's sun gazing at air was unleashed by him to the extreme. At the same time, coupled with the extreme speed that erupted from the internal binding seal, Chu Xiu could easily dodge all the attacks of the broadaxe. However, Chu Xiu was not simply dodging. His figure directly swept behind Chu Xiu. Several 5Chi's origin realm martial artists had already surrounded him, wanting to hold Chu Xiu back and create an opportunity for the unity of heaven and man realm martial artist behind him who was holding the broadaxe. The heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand suddenly slashed out, condensing devil chi and evil chi into his body. The sword will of the Avici Dao 3 sabers was also integrated into it, making this saber extremely terrifying. The scene of Chu Xiu using this saber to kill an unity of heaven and man realm expert was still vivid in their minds. The expressions of the 5Chi's origin realm martial artists suddenly changed, and they immediately wanted to dodge. The other martial artists dodged in time, but one of them was a little too slow. He was directly pulled into the saber aura. With a loud bang, a mist of blood drifted away, and there was no one left on the scene. This person was much more unlucky than the Su family's patriarch, and he died without a complete corpse. Chu Xiu stepped forward, and another 5Chi's origin realm martial artist wanted to take advantage of the gap in Chu Xiu's saber to launch a sneak attack. However, Chu Xiu's left hand pinched the treasure vase seal, and in an instant, an infinite Buddha's light bloomed, directly blasting the 5Chi's origin realm martial artist away, and a large mouthful of blood gushed out. With a wave of one hand, boundless devil chi erupted, and the martial artist's blood was sucked out of his body along with the devil chi. In less than 3 breaths, his entire body had been sucked dry by Chu Xiu's devil blood technique. When the devil blood technique was created, it was not actually used to kill people. It was only used as a support in battle, and it was used in preparation for using the blood-dissipating saber. After all, when 2 martial artists of similar strength were fighting, it was too difficult to use the devil blood technique to absorb all the blood and chi of the other party. However, although Chu Xiu and the 5Chi's origin realm martial artist were in the same realm, the combat effectiveness of the two sides seemed to be a whole realm apart. The other party could not block Chu Xiu's devil blood technique at all. Taking another step forward, Chu Xiu waved one hand, and the blood that had been sucked out by Chu Xiu condensed into an evil blood blade, slashing out in a direction. Even though the martial artist dodged left and right, the blood blade seemed to be able to predict his position in advance, and instantly pierced through him at an incredible angle. In the blink of an eye, he had killed 2 people, and Chu Xiu took another step towards Li Yuan. At this moment, Li Yuan really began to panic. Why did this Chu Xiu seem to be stronger than when he was in the Luo family? Block Chu Xiu. After Li Yuan shouted this sentence, he directly turned around and fled. Although this kind of action seemed a little too cowardly, in Li Yuan's opinion, this was called rational. Chu Xiu had clearly come for him, and if he did not kill him, he would not stop. If he did not run at this time, could it be that he was going to die? Seeing that Chu Xiu was going to chase Li Yuan again, the unity of heaven and human realm martial artist holding the giant axe behind him could not help but feel anxious. The giant axe in his hand was surrounded by a storm of gang qi, and he wanted to intercept Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu, who had been dodging just now, suddenly turned around and attacked the unity of heaven and human realm martial artist holding the giant axe. As the murderous intent descended, Chu Xiu's eyes were already dyed with a layer of dark red. The annihilation of heaven and earth oblivion killing fist suddenly burst out, and the absolute power of the fist directly caused the giant axe in the unity of heaven and human realm martial artist's hand to tremble. In addition, he had always thought that Chu Xiu only wanted to kill Li Yuan and would not turn around to tangle with him, so he was not prepared at all. When they suddenly exchanged blows, even the giant axe in his hand almost flew out of his hand. Chapter 460. Chu Xiu turned around and attacked the warrior, catching him off guard. Under the powerful force of the extinguishing sky and destroying earth oblivion killing fist, the giant axe in his hand almost flew out. However, before he could react, Chu Xiu had already attacked again. The great Vajra will seal fell and the Buddha's light exploded. The Vajra demon's subduing power blasted him back a few steps. The sun will seal was formed and the 5 elements rotated in an instant. The powerful force that seemed to be endless directly cracked his hand, and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At this time, Chu Xiu did not stop at all. He turned around and formed the Aquarius seal again. In an instant, a supreme light bloomed, and the powerful force directly blasted the giant axe in his hand away. The unity of heaven and human realm warrior looked at Chu Xiu in horror. At this time, his hands were dripping with blood, and several of his bones were broken. He was a warrior who specialized in body-enhancing techniques. Because of this, he was very confident in his own strength. Although he had not fought with the Great Light Temple's warriors before, he was confident that his strength was not inferior to the Great Light Temple's warrior monks. In the end, in front of Chu Xiu, his confidence was shattered to nothing. A 5-Chi's origin realm warrior whose realm was lower than his could crush him to such an extent in terms of strength. However, at this time, he did not have time to think too much. Chu Xiu was already charging at him with the demonic blade in his hand. Without a weapon, the warrior directly punched at Chu Xiu. The powerful wind from the punch seemed to be able to tear the sky and the earth, and its power was not inferior to his giant axe. However, Chu Xiu's blade suddenly became extremely ethereal. Just as the warrior's fist was about to land, the heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand suddenly changed direction. Demonic qi surged like an antelope hanging its horn, and it easily chopped off one of the warrior's arms. The martial artist roared angrily. Not only did he not flee, but he even ignited all the blood and qi in his body, dyeing his other arm red. With boundless power, he once again blasted towards Chu Xiu. Unfortunately, all of this was useless. Under Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air, this kind of martial path with simple transformations was the easiest for Chu Xiu to see through. At this moment, that cultivator didn't know at all that Chu Xiu had already laid out an inescapable net, and he was the prey in the net. No matter how he struggled, it was futile. The long saber swept down, and Chu Xiu's figure was like the wind. Amidst the roar of demonic qi, a human head flew into the sky. That martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm had been beheaded by Chu Xiu. In all fairness, the strength of this martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm was relatively good, but his strength could only be considered good. In the end, it was still difficult for him to escape the fate of being killed by Chu Xiu. At this moment, Chu Xiu looked at Li Yuan. After being blocked for so long, with Li Yuan's speed, he was about to escape from the cave. As the leader of this matter, Li Yuan was the first to escape. This kind of thing was not good to say, and when he returned to the Crown Prince, he could easily be punished by the Crown Prince. But at this moment, Li Yuan couldn't care about anything else. Chu Xiu's goal was obviously to kill him. If he didn't escape now, he would be giving his life away. With his hand forming the inner binding seal, Chu Xiu's figure seemed to have shrunk to an inch. With a step, he had already crossed a distance of over 100 feet. In just a few breaths' time, he had already arrived behind Li Yuan. Moreover, at this time, Eunuch Chen and the others were already entangled by Eunuch Li and Fang Zhenqi. There was no martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm to save Li Yuan. As for the other martial artists at the Five Qis origin realm, whether they could withstand Chu Xiu's move was a problem. Seeing that he couldn't escape, Li Yuan turned around and shouted, "Chu Xiu!" Chu Xiu didn't want to give Li Yuan a chance to speak at all. What greeted Li Yuan was Chu Xiu's saber. Seeing the surging demonic aura and sanguine aura descend, Li Yuan condensed the Gang Qi around his body to the extreme. He punched out with both fists, and the green Gang Qi directly evolved into an Gang Qi shield of over 100 feet in front of him. However, it was easily destroyed by Chu Xiu. The demonic aura entered his body, and blood flowed uncontrollably from the corner of Li Yuan's mouth. At this moment, Chu Xiu slashed down with his saber again. Li Yuan could no longer resist it head-on. The blood and qi around his body burned, and his speed instantly rose to the extreme. He wanted to dodge and escape. However, just as he moved, Chu Xiu's saber momentum had already followed him like a shadow. Under Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air, any of Li Yuan's movements could be seen clearly. Unless his speed was faster than Chu Xiu's, to the extent that even if Chu Xiu could use the heaven sun gazing at air to see through his movements, Chu Xiu wouldn't be able to catch up to him. Only then would he be able to escape. However, it was a pity that Li Yuan didn't have such speed. Therefore, he could only watch as the saber slashed towards him. In the face of life and death, Li Yuan roared angrily, and the blood and qi around his body burned to the extreme. The shadow of a blood-colored demon appeared behind him, and he condensed his fist intent to meet Chu Xiu's saber. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly retracted his saber and retreated. The saber actually didn't slash down. Just as Li Yuan was feeling puzzled, the demonic aura in Chu Xiu's hand rose. The blood and qi around Li Yuan suddenly burned at a speed that was 10 times faster than before. The majestic power of the blood and qi soared into the sky, and even the shadow of the demon that had condensed behind him was burning. Li Yuan definitely didn't know how terrifying the great demonic blood technique was. Sometimes, in the face of the great demonic blood technique, putting his life on the line was a luxury. Looking at Chu Xiu, Li Yuan roared in indignation. His blood and qi were completely burned, and his body shriveled up like a zombie as he fell to the ground. Looking at Li Yuan's corpse below, Chu Xiu actually felt a little sad. A future big shot had died at his hands, just like that. This made Chu Xiu feel like he had changed history. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, Li Yuan wasn't any different from others before he received the inheritance of the opportunity. In fact, among the warriors of the same level, he could only be said to be not bad, but not the best. How could a golden qilin be a creature in a pond? It could transform into a dragon when it encountered a storm. For most of the warriors in the pugilistic world, unless you were the little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen or wisdom king Zhongshuan, who was born with a halo, the others were mostly nameless existences before they became famous. They could only wait for the opportunity that belonged to them to appear. For example, Luo Feiheng's falling out with the Luo family was an opportunity. Lu Fengxian obtaining the inheritance of the ancient demon god Lv Wenho was also such an opportunity. However, Li Yuan no longer had this opportunity now. However, it didn't matter. Chu Xiu could fight for it and see if he could get this opportunity. At that moment, the second prince's side had completely started to suppress the crown prince's side. When Eunuch Chen saw that Li Yuan had also been killed, his expression changed several times. He waved his hand and decisively retreated with his people. Li Yuan was dead. He also knew that he had completely messed up this time. It would be fine if he messed up. After all, he was the crown prince's personal eunuch and could be said to have watched the crown prince grow up. Even if he messed up, he wouldn't be punished. However, if he lost his life, he would lose everything. Therefore, Eunuch Chen was unusually decisive in escaping. As for Fang Zhenqi's side, they didn't choose to give chase. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but although they had the upper hand in terms of strength, they didn't have a crushing advantage. If they forcefully chased after the second prince and killed him, not to mention whether they could kill him or not, they would have to bear a considerable amount of losses themselves. They wouldn't do something like sacrificing 800 men to kill 1,000 enemies. Even if they sacrificed 500 of their own, Fang Zhenqi and Eunuch Li would still feel that they had suffered a loss. The outcome had been decided. Eunuch Li walked over and said with a smile, "This time, it was all thanks to official Chu's help. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do it so beautifully." Chu Xiu casually cupped his hands and said, "Eunuch Li is too polite. We just took what we needed." With Li Yuan dead, the Crown Prince's plan was completely ruined. What happened next was not something that Chu Xiu could meddle in. Chu Xiu didn't care whether the second prince killed or kept the warriors in the southwest. He just waited for Eunuch Li and the others to leave after dealing with these matters. The ones who returned to Daliang City before Chu Xiu and the others were naturally Eunuch Chen and the others. When Eunuch Chen had gone, he had brought along the experts under the Crown Prince, looking as if he was determined to win. However, when he returned, Li Yuan was dead. 2 of the 3 consecrators at the unity of heaven and man realm had died. More than half of his subordinates had also died. It was a miserable sight. At this time, the Crown Prince was still in his residence, reading and cultivating his mind. Of course, the Crown Prince didn't have much time to read. Most of the time, he was enjoying himself. The rest of the time, he was arranging for his subordinates to develop their various factions. Seeing Eunuch Chen return in such a miserable state, LV Longji's expression immediately changed. He hurriedly asked, "Where's Li Yuan? What's going on? Could it be that something happened in the southwest?" Eunuch Chen's face was filled with grief and indignation. "This old servant is guilty. Please punish me, Your Highness." As he spoke, Eunuch Chen recounted everything to LV Longji, including the reason why Chu Xiu had interfered in this matter. After listening, LV Longji's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. "Idiot! Trash! Scoundrel! Who told you to provoke Chu Xiu on your own?" LV Longji, who had always displayed a good upbringing, couldn't help but start cursing loudly. He wanted nothing more than to drag the already dead Li Yuan out from the ground and punish him severely. It was the same for this Chen Do. He had never imagined that his plans would once again be foiled by the same person, and that person was Chu Xiu again. If it could be said that Chu Xiu had accidentally stood on the opposite side of him previously, then this time, it was purely because of his own actions. But the heavens took pity on him. LV Longji really had no intention of making trouble for Chu Xiu. As the Crown Prince, LV Longji's reputation in the outside world had been pretty good, such as being courteous to the wise and magnanimous. But regardless of whether he was truly magnanimous or not, he would not go so far as to hold a grudge against Chu Xiu for what had happened to Jianghu Yuan. After all, although Chu Xiu was famous, compared to him, the Crown Prince, he was still a minor character. Although the Crown Prince would often mutter these words, he himself had forgotten them as time went by. In the end, Li Yuan and Chen Do had gone behind his back to provoke Chu Xiu. Not only had they failed to kill him, they had even forced Chu Xiu to side with the second prince, ruining his plans. LV Longji was so angry that his hands were trembling. Chapter 461. The Crown Prince, LV Longji, was actually the most unlucky one to be hit by this unexpected disaster. Because from the beginning, he did not know what was going on. Suddenly, his arrangements in the southwest were destroyed by Chu Xiu. Who could he go to reason with? Find Chu Xiu for revenge? Right now, Chu Xiu was with the second prince, and he was under house arrest. If he wanted to use the power of the imperial court to teach Chu Xiu a lesson, once things got out of hand, he would probably be the one to suffer. And now, even if LV Longji wanted to teach his subordinates a lesson, he could not do so. Li Yuan was already dead, and he could not really dig him up and whip his corpse again. Eunuch Chen was LV Longji's close confidant, and it could even be said that he would never betray him. He also controlled all kinds of forces under LV Longji, so LV Longji could not blame him too much. So LV Longji could only say unhappily, "All right, let's forget about this matter for now. But next time, if you dare to do these things on your own, then you can go and retire." Eunuch Chen hurriedly nodded and said, "Yes, this old servant will not dare." The crown prince's side was gloomy, but the second prince was very proud. Almost all the martial artists in the southwest had joined the second prince's side. Of course, they had no choice but to join the second prince. For example, Zheng Tiantu and the others had already chosen to be traitors. If they did not join the second prince, then who would help them block the crown prince's revenge? As for the other powers that chose to remain neutral, they followed the trend and sided with the second prince. So after returning to Great Liang City, the second prince personally called Chu Xiu over and said sincerely, "Chu Xiu, are you really not willing to join this prince's side? You have seen this prince's strength. My elder brother was only born a little earlier than me. In terms of strength and ability, how can he compare to me? If you join this prince's side, this prince will definitely not treat you unfairly. Eunuch Li is this prince's trusted eunuch. In the future, if this prince ascends to the throne, he will be the chief minister of the imperial household. And if you, Chu Xiu, join this prince, then this prince dares to grant you the position of great general. You can choose any one of them." This time, LV Longguang really saw Chu Xiu's strength and ability. He actually had quite a number of experts under him. There were those who gave him advice and suggestions, and there were also those who specialized in killing people. The only thing he lacked was someone like Chu Xiu, who was not bad at scheming. He was also very strong and could take charge of an area by himself. Therefore, this time, LV Longguang was sincerely trying to recruit Chu Xiu. He even made a promise to become a marquis. However, Chu Xiu still shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, Your Highness. I can't let Hallmaster Guan down. The Guanzhong torture room didn't let me down, so I naturally can't let the Guanzhong torture room down." Although Chu Xiu's words were dignified, he was laughing coldly in his heart. In this lifetime, he would never join any prince of Eastern Qi. Not to mention that Chu Xiu was not the kind of person who would willingly submit to others. The main reason was that he knew how long the emperor of Eastern Qi, Lu Haochang, could live. The only advantage this Eastern Qi emperor had over him was that he had lived for a long time. He had almost outlived his two sons to death. If Chu Xiu were to join LV Longguang's side, it would be a long time before he could be conferred the title of Marquis and Prime Minister. Unless he could assassinate LV Haochang and send him to the Western Paradise earlier, it would probably be impossible. LV Longguang frowned and said, "I know you want to repay the Guanzhong torture room's kindness. But a good bird chooses a good tree to fly. The Guanzhong torture room is not a good choice. Don't be fooled by the Guanzhong torture room's glory now. That's because the Guanzhong torture room is in a period of peace when the three countries are not at war. Therefore, the Guanzhong torture room thrives on the trade between the three countries. But if one day the three countries go to war, not to mention three countries, even if two of them go to war together, the Guanzhong torture room won't be able to withstand it." After all, LV Longguang was the second prince of Eastern Qi. He wouldn't spend all his time thinking about the infighting with the crown prince. He had an understanding of the world situation. Naturally, the Guanzhong torture room was the same. Some people in Jianghu had long seen that the times made heroes, and it was also the time for heroes to build momentum. The Guanzhong torture room happened to have talents like Chu Kuanga and Guan Siyu, and it happened to be during the period of armistice between the three countries. That was why the Guanzhong torture room had developed to its current scale. But if the next leader of the Guanzhong torture room was incompetent and couldn't maintain this balance, or if something unexpected happened between the three countries, the position of the Guanzhong torture room would be in danger. Chu Xiu still shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness, but I may have to disappoint you." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, LV Longguang sighed in disappointment, but he didn't force it. He wasn't stupid enough to forcefully recruit Chu Xiu as his subordinate. LV Longguang waved his hand and said, "Since you don't want to join me, I won't force you. Well, I have one more thing to ask for your help. Go to Donghai County." Chu Xiu originally wanted to refuse, saying that he had to go back to the Guanzhong torture room. However, when he heard LV Longguang mention the East Sea County, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. In the original plot, the place where Li Yuan obtained the inheritance of opportunity was in the East Sea County. This made Chu Xiu connect the dots. "Oh, what is it? Please tell me, Your Highness." LV Longguang said, "Here's the thing. The holy monk of Donghai, Master Tam Yuan, is coming to the Central Plains today to preach. In fact, Master Tam Yuan is old and his life is coming to an end, so he is going to return to the Central Plains to pass away. Because Master Tam Yuan is so famous, when Master Tam Yuan comes ashore, the royal family of Eastern Qi and many people in Jianghu will come out to welcome him." Speaking of this, LV Longguang looked a little depressed and said, "Father will definitely not come out, so I have to send someone with enough weight. My eldest brother is the crown prince, so he is naturally the first choice. This kind of thing is basically not difficult for him. Although father didn't ask me to go, he didn't say that I can't send someone. This king's subordinates are not easy to use, so I'll have to trouble you to help this king bring the gift to Master Tan Yuan. In any case, this king only needs to reveal my name in front of Master Tan Yuan and the many people of the Jianghu." Chu Xiu listened quietly, but there was a strange look in his eyes. This was because the inheritance that Li Yuan obtained in the original plot belonged to this Master Tam Yuan. Speaking of this Master Tam Yuan was really famous, but it was not because of his strength, but because of what he did. Of course, this Master Tam Yuan was also very strong. At his peak, he was even an expert in the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. This Master Tam Yuan was not from the Great Light Temple, nor was he from the Sabodhi Zen Temple. He was just a monk from a small temple. When he cultivated to the three-flower realm, he was already in his 50s. However, since then, Master Tam Yuan had decided to go east alone to spread Buddhism. There were many islands in the East Sea. These islands were large and small. Some were as big as a state, and some were even as big as a county. Therefore, there were a lot of people. However, because of the harsh environment, there were often natural disasters such as storms and tsunamis, so the warriors on these islands in the East Sea were somewhat violent. It was under such an environment that Master Tam Yuan went east alone, spreading Buddhism on every island and dispelling hostility and hatred. During this period, he experienced countless dangers and great horrors between life and death. His martial arts cultivation advanced rapidly, and he quickly climbed to the martial Tao master realm, becoming a famous master in the East Sea. If that was all, Master Tam Yuan's fame would not have reached the Central Plains. What really made Master Tam Yuan famous was a few decades ago. A warrior asked Master Tam Yuan to save the people on his island when a small island was engulfed by a tsunami. In the end, Master Tam Yuan actually made a move and fought against the power of heaven and earth alone. He even stepped into the true fire spiritual cultivation realm under the pressure. However, even the true fire spiritual cultivation realm was no match for the endless power of heaven and earth. In the end, although Master Tam Yuan managed to save the small island, his own foundation was also damaged. Not only was he severely injured, but he even fell back to the martial Tao master realm. It was impossible for him to make any progress in this life. Therefore, although he was a powerhouse in the true fire spiritual cultivation realm, he only stayed in this realm for a day. As this matter spread to the Central Plains, Master Tam Yuan was recognized by the entire pugilistic world as a true Buddhist master. Even the Great Light Temple and Subodhi Monastery admired him very much. It was already very difficult for him to be willing to go to a barren land like the East Sea to spread Buddhism alone. However, Master Tam Yuan was willing to give up the powerful cultivation of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm to save the people on that island. Such a person deserved to be called a holy monk who truly had mercy in his heart. What martial art practitioners pursued in their entire lives was ultimate power. Even if the monks from the Great Light Temple always talked about being merciful, Chu Xiu could guarantee that none of the monks from the Great Light Temple would be willing to give up their cultivation to save the lives of an island. Chu Xiu never had a good impression of monks, but Master Tam Yuan could be said to be a true Buddhist master. There was no stain on his personal morality. According to the second prince, Master Tam Yuan came to the Central Plains because he was nearing the end of his lifespan. He was ready to return to his roots and pass away in the Central Plains. However, only Chu Xiu knew that Master Tam Yuan probably did not just want to return to his roots. He also wanted to find a successor. After all, Master Tam Yuan was also a warrior. He definitely had his own obsession when it came to martial arts inheritance. When he was in the East Sea, he only cared about spreading Buddhism and dispelling the hostility and hatred of the East Sea warriors. How could he have the time to teach disciples? Therefore, he came to the Central Plains this time because he wanted to find a reliable successor for himself before he passed away. However, Chu Xiu still did not understand why Master Tam Yuan would find Li Yuan to be his successor in the original plot. At least, Chu Xiu could not see any similarities between Li Yuan and Master Tam Yuan. However, this was no longer important. Li Yuan was already dead. If Chu Xiu wanted to seize Li Yuan's creation inheritance, he only needed to do one thing, and that was to lean towards Li Yuan as much as possible. As for whether this would work or not, it would depend on luck. Chapter 462. Chu Xiu had already decided to go to Donghai County to meet Master Tan Yuan, who was famous in Jianghu. However, in the face of the second prince, Chu Xiu remained calm and said, "With my friendship with His Highness, this is not a problem. But now I have offended the Crown Prince. What should I do if the Crown Prince comes to make trouble for me?" The second prince waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. Since I asked you to go on my behalf, how could I not consider this problem? Although my eldest brother's identity and status are enough to meet Master Tam Yuan, my father is worried that he is too young to control the situation, so he specially sent another influential Wu Dao Grand Master, Xiao Baiyu, the Chancellor of Wuxia Academy. Lord Xiao Baiyu never participates in the struggle between princes, but there is a senior behind me who once made Lord Xiao Baiyu owe him a favor. If you go there, I will ask someone to bring a message to Lord Xiao Baiyu. As long as Lord Xiao Baiyu is there, my elder brother will never dare to hurt you." Chu Xiu nodded. He believed what the second prince said. With Xiao Baiyu's status in Eastern Qi, even the Crown Prince had to be polite to him. Although Xiao Baiyu was only a Wu Dao Grand Master and not in the true fire realm, he was more important to Eastern Qi than an expert in the true fire realm. Every year, Wuxia Academy provided a large number of potential masters to the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. These people were the hope of the future for Eastern Qi, and Wuxia Academy was a continuous existence for the future of Eastern Qi. Therefore, Xiao Baiyu's status in the Eastern Qi Imperial Court was very special. Whether it was the Emperor of Eastern Qi or the General, they all had to be polite to Xiao Baiyu. With this promise, Chu Xiu directly took the second prince's gift to Donghai Prefecture. The second prince was not afraid that Chu Xiu would run away with the gift, because Master Tam Yuan was already a dying man. The second prince did not expect to win the support of Master Tam Yuan by sending a gift, so this time he just asked Chu Xiu to bring his gift to build up his reputation. The gift was naturally not something valuable. It was just a string of Buddha beads left by an eminent monk in antiquity times. Although it had been immersed in Buddha's light for a long time and had some power, it was not a precious treasure. With the gift, Chu Xiu directly went all the way to Donghai Prefecture. Donghai Prefecture was adjacent to the East Sea. Originally, it was not a prosperous place, and only some fleets coming and going from the East Sea often rested here. Therefore, the warriors of Eastern Qi and those on the islands of the East Sea were relatively common here. But with the news that Master Tam Yuan was about to return to the Central Plains, many people came to Donghai Prefecture in person, ready to see the glory of Master Tam Yuan, and most of them were warriors of the Buddhism sect. In recent years, the Buddhism sect was still extremely strong, but this strength was only in terms of force. When it came to the masters of the Great Light Temple or the Sabodhi Zen Temple, whether it was Su Yun or Su Ci, people would only say that they were masters of the Buddhism sect, but they would not be given the title of holy monk. To put it bluntly, even if someone wanted to give them the title, they would be too embarrassed to admit it. Therefore, Tan Yuan was now almost recognized in Jianghu as a master of the Buddhism sect, a holy monk of great virtue, worthy of being admired by many masters of the Buddhism sect. At this time, a dense crowd of warriors had gathered at the Dragon Beach at the mouth of Donghai Prefecture, waiting for the arrival of the fleet carrying Master Tam Yuan. Chu Xiu was also leaning on a boulder, holding a pot of yellow wine that he had brought from a small town outside the Dragon Beach, and he was drinking it slowly. In fact, Chu Xiu had already been waiting here for 2 days. Of course, there was no fixed time for sailing on the sea, so Chu Xiu also patiently waited here, and at the same time, thought about what he would say when he met Master Tan Yuan. Of course, the most important thing was to lean his state of mind on Li Yuan. Only the heavens knew what he had said back then that could make a holy monk like Great Master Tan Yuan hand over all his knowledge to someone like Li Yuan. Although Chu Xiu did not have the qualifications to comment on Li Yuan's character, at the very least, that fellow could not be considered a good person. Furthermore, although he later became the Northern Jinbei king of Eastern Qi, a general who had once turned the tide and led the declining Eastern Qi to defeat the Northern Yan, and had a good reputation in Eastern Qi, he was a hero to the enemy. At that time, Li Yuan was worthy of being called vicious and merciless. The people of the Northern Yan hated him to the core. While Chu Xiu was deep in thought, there wasn't a single person around him. The closest person to him was over 100 feet away. As the person ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard, everyone present naturally knew of Chu Xiu. In Eastern Qi, Chu Xiu's reputation was not that good. News of what had happened in the southwest had not spread so quickly. After all, the southwest was a remote and uncivilized land. Not to mention killing a few people, even if Chu Xiu had massacred a few sects, it would not have been obvious. But now that he had appeared here, some anemophilia heard some news and spread the news of what Chu Xiu had done in the southwest. After all, others might not know about this, but the anemophilia definitely knew. However, the person who spread the news was probably not from Wind Sweeping Tower. Wind Sweeping Tower's anemophilia still had professional ethics and would not have such a cheap mouth. So in this way, everyone also knew that Chu Xiu had actually interfered in the struggle between the Crown Prince and the Second Prince and had begun to stir up trouble in the southwest. This fellow was really not a person who would settle down, so it was better to stay away from him. However, everyone was also a little curious about what Chu Xiu was doing here. Was he also here to welcome Master Tam Yuan? They all knew that Chu Xiu and those filthy people from the Great Light Temple had a lot of enmity with him from the Buddhist sect. In the end, Chu Xiu had come to welcome the Buddhist sect's holy monk, Tan Yuan. This was strange no matter how they looked at it. In particular, there were some Buddhist sect ancient martial art practitioners who came from small temples. They all secretly glared at Chu Xiu. Of course, they only glared at him in secret. They did not dare to glare at him openly. They were not from the Great Light Temple, so they did not have the courage to provoke Chu Xiu. At this moment, a person actually took the initiative to approach Chu Xiu and said in a doubtful tone, "Hey, isn't this Brother Chu? Why have you also come to welcome Master Tam Yuan? I heard that you have a good relationship with those monks." Wait, it's not just a rumor. It seems to be the truth. As this person approached, everyone present immediately began to discuss in low voices. The person who had come to Chu Xiu's side was Sword King City's Fang Qi Shao. At this moment, he was carrying a long sword diagonally. His white clothes were still stained with some wine stains, and his hair was a little messy. It was as if he had just been woken up from his bed. Chu Xiu also looked at Fang Qi Shao somewhat speechlessly. Why was it him again? Chu Xiu had a deep impression of this talkative sword leader. However, Chu Xiu did not have any enmity towards Fang Qi Shao. Although his relationship with Sword King City was not very good, Fang Qi Shao was different. It was difficult for people to really feel enmity towards him. Moreover, during the battle between the righteous and demonic factions on Floating Jade Mountain, Chu Xiu had used Fang Qi Shao's Karma Sword principle to greatly improve his cultivation of the heaven's sun gazing at air. Therefore, in theory, he still owed Fang Qi Shao half a favor. Chu Xiu said faintly, "The Buddhist sect is the Buddhist sect, and Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan. I admire Master Tam Yuan's character, but what does it have to do with the Buddhist sect? Buddha is Buddha, people are people. Some people chant sutras and worship Buddha all their lives, but they do not do many good deeds. Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan. It has nothing to do with whether he comes from the Buddhist sect or not." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, the Buddhist sect warriors present glared at Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's words were simply pointing at the mulberry tree and scolding the locust tree. No, it should be said that the Buddhist sect disciples were hypocrites. However, these monks were not stupid. Although they were angry, no one jumped out to argue with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu also did not care about them. He just looked at Fang Qi Shao in surprise and said, "What are you doing here? The 5 major sword sects are not the Buddhist sect. Are you also here to welcome Master Tam Yuan because you admire him?" Fang Qi Shao spread out his hands and made a helpless expression. He said, "Master Tam Yuan's character is indeed worthy of admiration. But this kind of thing should be kept in the heart. Why bother to meet him? I can't be bothered to fish for fame." As soon as Fang Qi Shao said this, most of the people present looked a little gloomy, because they had indeed come with such a thought. However, Fang Qi Shao also directly ignored this group of people and continued to say, "I was having a good time in Eastern Qi's place. With my handsome appearance, the girls of Golden Wind Pavilion were very enthusiastic about me. In the end, before I had a good time, I was called up by the people of the sect. They insisted that I come to welcome Master Tam Yuan and make a wave of reputation. Although I know that I am handsome and irreplaceable, they did not inform me in advance about this kind of thing. This made me very passive." Speaking of this, Fang Qi Shao revealed a regretful expression. He shook his head and said, "When I left, the girls of Golden Wind Pavilion and the madam were still chasing after me. Eastern Qi is indeed the hinterland of the Central Plains. The girls here are hot and enthusiastic, much more enthusiastic than the girls in my western regions." Hearing this, Chu Xiu faintly felt that something was wrong. He suddenly said, "Don't tell me you didn't pay them?" Fang Qi Shao was stunned and said, "Pay what?" Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Don't you pay when you visit a brothel?" Seventh young Master Fang said confidently, "When they pulled me in, they kept praising me. For a young master like me who is unparalleled in the world, it's already good enough that I didn't ask them for money. How could I give them money?" At this time, Chu Xiu was really shocked. He didn't know how to describe this Fang Qi Shao. Was this guy pretending to be stupid or was he really stupid? The third on the Longhu list, the future successor of Sword King City, and a genius swordsman, Fang Qi Shao actually visited a tyrant chicken. Who would believe such a thing? Chapter 463. Fang Qishao was probably the first person in history to talk about visiting a brothel without paying in such a refreshing and refined manner. Based on Fang Qishao's appearance, he was still a few levels away from visiting a brothel without paying. It would be more appropriate if he were someone like Lu Fengxian. Of course, as far as Chu Xiu knew, Lu Fengxian didn't seem to have such a hobby. However, if Fang Qishao revealed his identity, he probably wouldn't have to pay. Unfortunately, the girls in the brothel didn't care about the appearance of the experts on the Longhu list. Everyone in the crowd was talking about it. Perhaps they didn't expect that the famous Fang Qishao turned out to be such a person. However, there were still a few sword-wielding martial artists who didn't talk about it. Instead, they covered their faces in shame. How shameful. They were also from Sword King City and had accompanied Fang Qishao here. In fact, Fang Qishao didn't really visit a tyrant chicken. After the incident, they had already paid the brothel's proprietress. They thought that the matter would be over. Who would have thought that Fang Qishao would reveal it himself? These people even lamented inwardly. What kind of sin did Sword King City commit to have such an unreliable successor like Fang Qishao? Although Fang Qishao's cultivation in sword principle was indeed the best among the younger generation, the disciples of Sword King City would rather Fang Qishao be weaker than him. It would be better if he was more reliable than he was now. However, Fang Qishao didn't care about this at this time. Instead, he chatted with Chu Xiu and even freeloaded half of Chu Xiu's wine. Fang Qishao might be unreliable, but he still had his own pride. There were so many martial artists present, and among the younger generation, only Chu Xiu could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Therefore, even if he was unreliable, he would only talk nonsense with Chu Xiu here, and not randomly pick someone and say everything. At that moment, another group of people arrived. There were more than 100 of them, and it was a grand display. They were from the imperial court. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. The people from the Eastern Qi imperial court had arrived. Leading them were Crown Prince LV Longji and his men. This was the first time that Chu Xiu had seen LV Longji. Compared to the second prince, LV Longguang, this crown prince was much less outstanding. From his appearance, LV Longji had the appearance of a refined middle-aged man, with a trace of nobility, and a somewhat graceful feeling. Speaking of which, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince was quite unlucky. He had a father who was very capable and didn't want to abdicate the throne. He had been the Crown Prince for decades. In fact, although the emperors of Eastern Qi were not short-lived, none of them lived too long. Being an emperor took a lot of effort. Before you ascended the throne, you could find time to practice. But when you sat on the throne, you could also practice. However, the premise was that you had to properly manage the affairs of the country, big or small, so that you could practice with peace of mind. Otherwise, even the imperial family of Eastern Qi would consider changing the emperor, let alone outsiders. Therefore, no matter how strong the emperors were when they ascended the throne, they basically worked too hard in the later stages. Even if they took some elixirs to prolong their lives, the effect was not great. In the end, LV Haochang's ability was a so-so. He just happened to meet the requirements of being an emperor. Although he did not make any great contributions, he did not destroy the country. Moreover, with his ability, he could not do it even if he wanted to work his heart out. So, in this way, LV Haochang, who was relieved, lived a long life. On the contrary, he caused his sons to suffer a bit. Of course, from Chu Xiu's point of view, Lu Longji was not only unlucky, but his ability was also limited. He had hung the title of Crown Prince for so many years, but in the end, he didn't distance himself from the other princes. Even the second prince, LV Longguang, was almost on equal footing with him. This ability was clearly very problematic. Lu Longji had never met Chu Xiu, but Eunuch Chen had a very deep impression of Chu Xiu. Seeing Chu Xiu, Eunuch Chen immediately gritted his teeth and said, Chu Xiu. He actually dares to come here. Hearing Eunuch Chen's words, Lu Longji also looked at Chu Xiu with a gloomy expression. In fact, although Lu Longji resented Chu Xiu for handing over the evidence of him colluding with Jiang Wenyuan to the second prince, he was only angry at that time. Later on, he almost forgot about this matter. But this time, Chu Xiu had ruined his plans in the southwest, and this made Lu Longji hate him to the bone. So when he saw Chu Xiu this time, Lu Longji directly walked over with a gloomy expression. Everyone present looked at Chu Xiu as if they were watching a show. Although the pugilistic world and the imperial court were often opposed to each other, in the territory of Eastern Qi, there was no need to say what the crown prince of Eastern Qi represented. This Chu Xiu was probably in trouble. Fang Qishao didn't know what Chu Xiu had done in the southwest. He only looked at Chu Xiu with a dumbfounded expression. What was going on? This fellow had even offended the crown prince of Eastern Qi. Lu Longji said with a gloomy expression, Chu Xiu, I've already let bygones be bygones for what you did last time, and I didn't come looking for trouble with you. But who would have thought that you would challenge my bottom line again and again? Do you really think that I'm easy to bully? Chu Xiu said calmly, Your Highness, you're wrong. Aren't Li Yuan and Eunuch Chen your subordinates? Why didn't you say so when they came looking for trouble with me at the Luo family? I, Chu Xiu, am not someone who can be trampled on. I only believe in one principle, and that is, if someone slaps me once, I will return it 10 times. Lu Longji laughed coldly and said, Good, good, good. You are unyielding, Chu Xiu. But I want to see how unyielding you, Chu Xiu, can be. As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Longji wanted his subordinates to attack Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu was still with the second prince, or he was out of Eastern Qi, Lu Longji really couldn't attack Chu Xiu. But now Chu Xiu was alone. What was there for Lu Longji to be afraid of? Even if someone said that Lu Longji was stingy and deliberately retaliated, Lu Longji wanted to vent his anger today. But at this moment, a faint voice came from behind Lu Longji, Your Highness, His Majesty asked us to come here today to welcome Master Tam Yuan. How can you attack here? I don't care about the personal grievances between you and Chu Xiu in other places, but today, His Highness can't attack here. Xiao Baiyu, dressed in white, stood in the crowd of the crown prince. As soon as he spoke, those who were about to attack all stopped there. They knew Xiao Baiyu's position in Eastern Qi, and his words were more effective than the crown prince's. Lu Longji's face darkened, and he frowned, Your Excellency, I know it's not appropriate to welcome Master Tam Yuan to see blood, but I don't have to kill Chu Xiu today. I just want to teach him a lesson. Xiao Baiyu shook his head and said, No means no. If Your Highness wants to attack, I won't stop you, but I will report what happened today to His Majesty. Hearing this, Lu Longji immediately became a little listless. Xiao Baiyu's position in Eastern Qi was not ordinary. Because of this, he actually didn't take sides in the succession of the throne. Even if this time the second prince used a favor to ask Xiao Baiyu to help him temporarily, it was just a help, and it had nothing to do with the choice of the throne. Therefore, the emperor of Eastern Qi, Lu Haochang, trusted Xiao Baiyu very much. If Xiao Baiyu spoke ill of the crown prince in front of Lu Haochang, it was more effective than 100 words from others. Lu Longji glared at Chu Xiu fiercely, and directly turned to leave with his people. Since Xiao Baiyu came forward to protect Chu Xiu, he dared not offend Xiao Baiyu because of this, which was not worth the loss. After the crown prince left, Chu Xiu cupped his hands to Xiao Baiyu and said, Thank you for your help, Grand Chancellor. Xiao Baiyu looked at Chu Xiu, shook his head and said, You're welcome. I just returned the favor. Xiao Baiyu looked at Chu Xiu and was a little speechless. It was the first time for him to see such a murderous young man. It was a miracle in Jianghu that Chu Xiu could go all the way to the present without being killed halfway. Of course, at this time, Chu Xiu also felt a little strange when he looked at Xiao Baiyu, because he found that Jixia Grand Chancellor seemed to owe favors everywhere. Last time, Xiao Baiyu saved Yan Tingting from him because he owed Yan Huainan a favor. And this time, Xiao Baiyu helped him because he owed a favor to a Wu Dao Grand Master on the side of the second prince. Favors were the most difficult to return. For example, Xiao Baiyu now. As long as someone asked, unless he had decided to be shameless, he must return the favor. Therefore, in Jianghu, Chu Xiu rarely owed favors. Most of the time, he let others owe him favors. Xiao Baiyu sighed and said, I heard about the Luo family. How is Fei Hong now? Luo Fei Hong was not only a member of the Luo family of Wujuan, but also a disciple of Jixia Academy. It could even be said that she was one of the most outstanding disciples that Xiao Baiyu had seen since he was in charge of Jixia Academy for so many years. Although Luo Fei Hong was a woman, Xiao Baiyu knew that as long as Luo Fei Hong was given time, she would definitely grow to a point that shocked everyone in the future. Unfortunately, the Luo family did not have Xiao Baiyu's vision, and they did not believe in Xiao Baiyu's vision. They would rather marry Luo Fei Hong in exchange for immediate benefits than to cultivate Luo Fei Hong with all their efforts and bet on their future. Xiao Baiyu wanted to save Luo Fei Hong, but unfortunately, he was the Grand Chancellor of Jixia Academy. His every move represented Jixia Academy, and Jixia Academy belonged to the imperial court. After all, the Luo family of Wujuan was one of the 9 great families. One was in Jianghu, while the other was in the imperial court. It was a little sensitive for Xiao Baiyu to show up without authorization. Therefore, Xiao Baiyu was going to wait until Luo Fei Hong married into the Ying family, and then he would ask the Ying family to let Luo Fei Hong come back. He also had some friendship with the Ying family in Shangshui. However, he did not expect that Luo Fei Hong would humiliate the Luo family on the day of the contest for marriage by fighting with Chu Xiu and others, which was somewhat unexpected. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.